across thousands of years. One king tortured Israel, another cut off the thumbs and toes of defeated kings. Then one man slaughtered innocent priests. These are the most terrifying people in the Bible. What could make a king so scared that he burned himself alive? Zimri thought he had taken everything he wanted. He had killed his own king, taken the throne for himself, and had all the power he needed. But then, an entire army turned against him. And when thousands of soldiers began marching toward his city, Zimri realized there was nowhere left to run. But how did Zimri go from becoming king to losing everything in only 7 days? To understand this, we must go back to a time when Israel's kings were killing each other. Israel had once been one nation, but it had split into 2 kingdoms many years earlier. Judah was in the south, and Israel was in the north. After that, Israel was rarely peaceful. Its kings often turned away from God, and some of them became king by killing the ruler before them. At that time, there was a man named Elah who became king. He may have worn the crown, but he could never be sure that another man would not try to take it from him. One of the officers who served Elah was named Zimri. He commanded half of the king's chariots. This meant that he controlled many soldiers, horses, and weapons. The king trusted him with great power. But Zimri was not satisfied with being an officer. He wanted to become king himself, and he began planning how to kill Elah and take his place. At that time, the capital city of Israel was Tirzah. The king lived there, and the palace stood near the center of the city. But most of Israel's soldiers were not in Tirzah. They were camped outside Gibbethon, a town controlled by the Philistines. Israel had attacked this town before, but it had not been able to take it. Now the army was trying again. The soldiers stayed outside the town and waited for a chance to break through its defenses. Because the army was at Gibbethon, fewer soldiers were left to protect Tirzah. The men who could have defended Elah were many miles away. Zimri and his chariot soldiers were still near the capital, so he had men and weapons close to the king. He also knew that the main army was too far away to stop him quickly. This gave him the chance he had been waiting for. Elah had not gone to Gibbethon with his army. He stayed behind in Tirzah. On one particular day, he was not even inside the palace. He was in the house of Arzah, the man who managed the king's home and servants. Elah was eating and drinking there. He continued to drink until he became drunk and could no longer think clearly. The servants and officers around him should have kept him safe, but no one expected an attack. Elah was away from the palace, away from the army, and unable to protect himself. Now the right moment had come. Zimri understood the danger. If his plan failed, he would be killed for turning against the king. But if it worked, Elah would be dead before the people of Tirzah knew what had happened. Zimri entered Arzah's house while Elah was still drunk. He walked through the rooms until he found him. There was no battle in the streets and no warning from the city guards. Zimri attacked so quickly that no one had time to save the king. Elah died inside the house where he had been drinking. In only a few moments, his rule was over. Zimri left that house and claimed that he was now the king of Israel. But killing Elah was only the beginning of Zimri's plan. Elah still had family members who might try to take back the throne. The family also had close friends who could gather soldiers and fight against Zimri. As long as any of them remained alive, Zimri believed that his own life was in danger. He decided that they all had to die. As soon as Zimri took control of the palace, he ordered his men to kill the family of Baasha. They searched for the former king's relatives and closest friends. They killed anyone who might help that family return to power. Zimri did not want to leave even one possible enemy alive. He believed these murders would make him safe and keep the crown in his hands. Zimri thought he was only removing his enemies, but something else was also happening. A warning from God was coming true. Years earlier, God had sent a prophet named Jehu, the son of Hanani, to speak against Baasha. God had allowed Baasha to become king, but Baasha did not lead Israel back to him. Instead, he followed the sinful example of Jeroboam. Jeroboam had made golden calves and told the people to worship them. He did this because he did not want the people to travel to Jerusalem in Judah to worship God. Baasha continued this false worship, and Israel continued to sin. Through Jehu, God warned that Baasha's family would be destroyed, just as Jeroboam's family had been destroyed. Zimri was not killing Baasha's family because he wanted to obey God. He was doing it because he wanted the throne. Even so, his actions caused the prophet's warning to come true. Zimri believed he was making his own future safe, but he was also preparing the way for his own death. The news soon spread through Tirzah. People heard that Elah had been killed inside Arza's house. Then they learned that Zimri had taken the palace and killed the rest of Baasha's family. Servants, officers, and travelers carried the news out of the city. In time, a messenger reached the Israelite army outside Gibbethon. The soldiers were shocked. They had left their homes to fight the Philistines under the king's orders. Now they learned that the king had been murdered while they were away.
Mom, look what I drew!
Wow, and you finished all the puzzles too.
Every page is filled with fun Bible activities, coloring pages, puzzles, word searches, and memory verses that make learning God's Word exciting.
If you like this Bible coloring book with loads of puzzles for you or your children, click the link in the description below.
One of his own officers had killed him and taken control of the capital. The army had not chosen Zimri, and the soldiers had no reason to trust him. If he had turned against Elah, he might also turn against anyone else who stood in his way. The soldiers looked to Omri, the commander of the whole army. They already knew him, and they trusted him to lead them in battle. They decided that they would not accept Zimri as king. Instead, they chose Omri. There was no large celebration or special event in the palace. They made their choice in the army camp outside Gibbethon. Therefore, all Israel made Omri, the commander of the army, king over Israel that day in the camp. 1 Kings 16:16. Israel now had two men who both claimed to be king. Zimri controlled the palace in Tirzah, but Omri controlled the main army. Omri ended the attack on the Philistine town and prepared to lead the soldiers back to Tirzah. The army left Gibbethon and marched toward the capital. The same soldiers whose absence had helped Zimri take power were now coming back to remove him. Travelers and messengers reached Tirzah before the army and warned Zimri that Omri was on the way. Only a few days had passed since Zimri had killed Elah, yet another man had already been chosen to replace him. Zimri knew that he was in serious danger. He had commanded half of the king's chariots, but those men could not defeat the whole army. Zimri called himself king, but he did not have enough men to keep control of the kingdom. Omri reached Tirzah with the army and surrounded the city. The soldiers blocked the roads so that Zimri could not escape. Then they began their attack. The people inside Tirzah knew that the army had come to remove Zimri. The city did not have enough soldiers to hold them back for long. Omri's men broke through the defenses and entered Tirzah. They moved through the streets and took control of the city. Zimri could see that he had lost. He could not defeat Omri, and he could not run away. He ran into the strongest part of the king's palace. This area was built to protect the king during an attack. Its strong walls may have stopped the soldiers for a short time, but they could not give Zimri a way out. Omri's men controlled the city and were taking control of the palace grounds. Zimri knew they would soon reach him. If they captured him, they would almost certainly kill him for murdering Elah and taking the throne. Zimri decided that he would not let Omri's soldiers take him alive. He started a fire inside the palace. The flames spread through the rooms and burned the building around him. Smoke rose above Tirzah as the king's house was destroyed. When Zimri saw that the city was taken, he went into the citadel of the royal palace and set the palace on fire around him. So he died. 1 Kings 16:18. Omri's soldiers stopped outside the palace as flames spread through the building. Smoke covered the center of Tirzah, and parts of the roof began to fall. The heat was too strong for anyone to enter, so the soldiers guarded the exits and waited. No one came out. When the fire finally became weaker, several soldiers entered the palace. They moved carefully through the burned rooms, stepping over fallen wood and stone. They searched for Zimri until they reached the strongest part of the king's house. There they found his body beneath the ruins. Zimri was dead. The soldiers returned to Omri and told him what they had found. Word quickly spread through Tirzah that the fighting was over. People slowly came out of their homes and looked toward the ruined palace, where smoke was still rising into the sky. Omri then ordered his soldiers to take control of the city. Guards were placed at the gates and along the main streets. Once Tirzah was secure, Omri entered with his officers and took command. The people had no chance against the Assyrians. Then suddenly, one angel came down from heaven. The next morning, none of the enemies were alive. King Hezekiah became ruler of Judah and would soon face the most powerful king on earth. He watched his nation become surrounded, but next thing he knew, an angel came down and every single enemy died. Hezekiah became king of Judah when he was 25 years old, but his kingdom was already living under the control of Assyria, the strongest empire around them. Assyria had already destroyed the northern kingdom of Israel. Many people were taken away from their homes. Judah stayed safe by giving silver and gold to the Assyrian king. As long as Judah kept paying, Assyria left them alone. But Assyria was not the only problem Hezekiah received from his father. Ahaz had been an evil king. He filled Judah with idols and even sacrificed his own children in the fire to false gods. He shut the doors of God's temple. The lamps went dark, and the people turned away from the Lord. Hezekiah refused to continue his father's ways. As soon as he became king, he opened the temple doors. He called the priests and Levites back to Jerusalem. Then he ordered them to clean every room and remove everything that did not belong there. For days, the men carried dirt and broken objects out of the temple. They cleaned the altar and prepared the holy objects again. The lamps were lit, and songs of worship returned. After years of silence, the people gathered inside God's temple once more. Hezekiah continued removing false worship from Judah. People had even begun worshipping the bronze snake that Moses had made many years earlier. God had once used it to save the Israelites, but now the people treated it like an idol. Hezekiah ordered the bronze snake smashed into pieces. Across Judah, Hezekiah destroyed false altars, broke sacred stones, and cut down the wooden poles used to worship other gods. Then he sent messengers across Judah and into the remaining towns of Israel. They invited everyone to come to Jerusalem for Passover. Some people laughed at the messengers and refused to listen. Others accepted the invitation. Families began traveling toward Jerusalem, and the city soon filled with worshippers. For the first time in many years, the people celebrated Passover together. While Judah returned to God, Hezekiah also made a dangerous decision. He stopped sending payments to Assyria. He would no longer live as the Assyrian king's servant. This decision gave Judah freedom, but it also placed Hezekiah directly against the most powerful king in the region. Hezekiah knew there would be an answer. The answer came from Sennacherib, the new king of Assyria. He sent his large army into Judah and attacked its protected cities. Assyrian soldiers surrounded one city after another. They built paths up to the walls, pushed heavy machines forward, and broke through the gates. News of the attacks reached Jerusalem. Messengers arrived every few days with another report. One city had fallen, then another was taken. Sennacherib's army was moving deeper into Judah, and Jerusalem could soon be next. Hezekiah began preparing the capital. He met with his officers and ordered them to block the springs outside the city. He did not want the Assyrian army to find plenty of water when it arrived. Workers repaired the broken parts of Jerusalem's wall. They built towers and raised another wall outside the first one. Hezekiah also ordered large numbers of shields and weapons to be made. Then he placed officers over the people and gathered them in the city square. "Be strong and brave," Hezekiah told them. "Do not be afraid of the king of Assyria. He has a great army, but the Lord our God is with us. God will fight our battles." The people were encouraged by their king's words. Yet the reports from outside Jerusalem kept getting worse. Sennacherib reached Lachish, one of Judah's strongest cities. His army surrounded it and began attacking its walls. Hezekiah now understood how close the danger had come. He became afraid and tried to stop the attack with money. He sent a message to Sennacherib and admitted that he had rebelled. He promised to pay whatever the Assyrian king demanded. Sennacherib demanded a huge payment. Hezekiah emptied the royal storehouses and took silver from the temple. He even removed gold from the temple doors. Then he sent everything to the Assyrian king. But the payment did not save Jerusalem. Sennacherib kept the silver and gold. Then he sent part of his army toward the city. The people of Jerusalem saw Assyrian soldiers gathering outside their walls. Roads leading out of the city were blocked. Hezekiah's soldiers took their places at the gates and towers. Everyone waited to hear what the Assyrians would do next. An Assyrian commander came forward with a message from Sennacherib. He stood near the wall and called out to Hezekiah's officers. He spoke in the language of Judah so the people nearby could understand him. "What are you trusting in?" he asked. "Do you think words can win a war? Hezekiah cannot protect you from the king of Assyria."
Before we continue, these videos takes hours and hours to make. Please like and subscribe and comment which country you are watching this from.
Hezekiah's officers asked the commander to speak in another language. They did not want everyone on the wall to hear his message, but he refused. He wanted the whole city to question Hezekiah. The commander shouted even louder. He told the people not to trust their king. He promised them food and land if they gave up. Then he began mocking the Lord. "Have the gods of any other nation saved them from Assyria?" he asked. "Where are those nations now? Why should you believe your God will save Jerusalem?" The people remained silent. Hezekiah had ordered them not to answer. The Assyrian commander continued speaking, but no reply came from the wall. Hezekiah's officers returned to the palace with their clothes torn. They repeated every word they had heard. Hezekiah tore his own clothes and covered himself with rough cloth. Then he went into the temple. He sent his officers to the prophet Isaiah and asked him to pray for the people who remained in Jerusalem. Isaiah sent back a clear answer from God. He told Hezekiah not to fear the Assyrian words. Sennacherib would hear troubling news and return to his own land. One day, he would be killed there by the sword. Soon, the Assyrian army left Jerusalem to deal with another approaching army. But Sennacherib had not forgotten Hezekiah. He sent him a letter filled with the same threats. The letter named the kingdoms Assyria had already destroyed. Their gods had not saved them. Sennacherib warned Hezekiah not to believe that the Lord would save Jerusalem. Hezekiah received the letter and read it. Then he went into the temple and spread it before the Lord. Hezekiah prayed, "Lord, you alone are God over every kingdom. It is true that Assyria has destroyed many nations. Their gods could not save them because they were only objects made by human hands. Now, Lord, save us from Sennacherib. Then every kingdom will know that you alone are God." God answered Hezekiah through Isaiah. Sennacherib had mocked the Lord, and God had heard him. The Assyrian king would not enter Jerusalem. He would not shoot an arrow into the city or build a path against its wall. He would return by the road he had used to come. That night, the Assyrian soldiers remained in their camp outside Jerusalem. The people inside the city stayed behind the walls. Hezekiah's army did not go out to fight them. Then the angel of the Lord struck the Assyrian camp. When morning came, 185,000 Assyrian soldiers were dead. The army that had defeated many kingdoms could no longer attack Jerusalem. Sennacherib ended his campaign and returned to Nineveh. But Hezekiah was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. Years later, Sennacherib entered the temple of his own god. While he was worshipping there, 2 of his sons killed him with swords. They escaped to another land, and another son became king. Isaiah's warning had come true. Sometime during Hezekiah's reign, he became very sick. His strength disappeared, and he could no longer leave his bed. Isaiah came to him with a message from God. "Put your house in order," Isaiah said. "You are going to die. You will not recover." Hezekiah turned his face toward the wall and began to pray. He asked God to remember how he had served him faithfully. Then the king wept deeply. Isaiah left the room and walked through the palace yard. Before he reached the outer gate, God spoke to him again. Isaiah immediately turned around and returned to Hezekiah. He told the king that God had heard his prayer and seen his tears. God would heal him and give him 15 more years of life. On the 3rd day, Hezekiah would be able to enter the temple again. God would also continue protecting Jerusalem from Assyria. Isaiah told the servants to prepare a mixture of figs. They placed it on Hezekiah's painful sore. Hezekiah then asked for a sign that God would truly heal him. Isaiah gave him a choice. The shadow on the palace steps could move forward 10 steps or backward 10 steps. Hezekiah said moving forward would be easy. He asked for the shadow to move backward. Isaiah prayed to God. Then the shadow moved back 10 steps. God healed Hezekiah, just as he had promised. The king recovered and returned to the temple. Hezekiah wrote about his sickness after he became well. He remembered how quickly his life had nearly ended. He thanked God for hearing his prayer and giving him more years. However, Hezekiah later became proud. He had gained great riches and honor. His storehouses held silver, gold, spices, shields, and many valuable objects. He also built places to store grain, wine, and oil. God had blessed him greatly. But Hezekiah began thinking too highly of himself. Messengers soon arrived from Babylon. Their king had heard about Hezekiah's sickness and recovery. He sent letters and a gift to Jerusalem. Hezekiah was pleased that a powerful kingdom had noticed him. He welcomed the messengers and showed them everything he owned. He led them through rooms filled with silver and gold. He showed them his spices, weapons, oil, and every valuable object in his storehouses. He kept nothing hidden. After the Babylonian messengers left, Isaiah came to Hezekiah. "Who were those men?" Isaiah asked. "Where did they come from? And what did they see?" Hezekiah said they had come from the distant land of Babylon. Then he admitted that he had shown them everything. There was nothing in his house that they had not seen. Isaiah warned him that a day would come when Babylon would carry away all the treasure he had displayed. Nothing would be left. Some members of Hezekiah's own family would also be taken away and forced to serve in Babylon's palace. Hezekiah realized that pride had entered his heart. He humbled himself before the Lord, and the people of Jerusalem humbled themselves with him. Because they turned back to God, the punishment did not come during Hezekiah's lifetime. Hezekiah accepted the message from God. He was thankful that Judah would have peace during the years that remained for him. He continued ruling Judah and made Jerusalem stronger. He built a tunnel that carried water from the spring of Gihon into the city. This gave Jerusalem a protected supply of water. Hezekiah completed many other projects and became respected by the nations around him. He ruled Judah for 29 years. When Hezekiah died, the people of Jerusalem honored him. What if I told you one man made God so angry that God himself turned against Israel? After Israel defeated Jericho, they thought no army could stop them, but then one man did something so terrible that God stopped protecting Israel, and a much smaller army destroyed them. What could Achan have done to bring God's judgment upon an entire nation? To find out, we must go back to the beginning. Israel had crossed the Jordan River and entered the land God had promised them. Their first enemy was Jericho. It was an ancient city surrounded by strong walls. Its gates were tightly shut. No one entered, and no one escaped. The people of Jericho believed their walls would protect them. But God had already promised the city to Israel. Among the Israelite soldiers was a man named Achan. He came from the tribe of Judah. Like every other soldier, Achan heard the strict command Joshua gave before the battle. Nothing from Jericho could be taken for personal use. The silver, gold, bronze, and iron belonged in the Lord's treasury. Everything else in the city had to be destroyed. "Stay away from the devoted things," Joshua warned. "If you take any of them, you will bring destruction upon the whole camp of Israel." Achan understood the command. He knew exactly what was forbidden. For 6 days, Israel marched around Jericho. On the 7th day, they marched around it 7 times. The priests blew their trumpets, and Joshua ordered the people to shout. A great cry rose from the army. Then the impossible happened. The ground shook beneath Achan's feet. Deep cracks spread across the walls of Jericho. Great stones broke apart and crashed to the ground. Towers fell. Dust filled the air. The walls that had protected Jericho for years collapsed in only a few moments. The Israelite soldiers rushed forward. Achan ran with them through the dust and entered the city. Men moved through the streets while fires began burning around them. The battle had been won exactly as God had promised. Most of the soldiers remembered Joshua's command. They refused to take anything for themselves. But inside one of Jericho's houses, Achan saw something. A beautiful robe lay among the possessions of the city. It had come from the distant land of Shinar, also called Babylon. Its cloth was soft and expensive. Its colors were richer than anything Achan owned. Beside the robe was a large amount of silver. There were 200 shekels in total. Near the silver rested a heavy bar of gold, weighing 50 shekels. For a moment, Achan only stared. He remembered Joshua's warning. These objects did not belong to him. The silver and gold were meant for the Lord's treasury. Taking them would be an act of disobedience. Achan could have turned away. Instead, he looked around the room. The streets outside were filled with noise. Soldiers hurried past the house. Smoke covered the sky. No one was watching him. A dangerous thought entered his mind. There was so much happening around him. Surely no one would notice 3 missing objects. The robe could remain hidden until the battle was forgotten. The silver and gold could make his family rich. He told himself that no one needed to know. Achan reached out and touched the robe. His choice was made. He quickly gathered the robe, the silver, and the gold. He wrapped them together and hid them beneath his cloak. Then he stepped out of the house and joined the other soldiers. Achan walked back toward the Israelite camp. Each step carried him farther from Jericho, but the stolen treasure remained pressed against his body. He tried to look calm. Achan said nothing. When he reached his tent, he waited until no one was watching. Then he went inside and pulled back the cloth covering the entrance. Inside, Achan dropped to his knees. He began digging into the dirt floor with his hands. He worked quickly, making a hole deep enough to hide the stolen objects. Sweat ran down his face as he listened for footsteps outside. When the hole was ready, Achan placed the robe inside. He added the gold and then buried the silver beneath everything else. He pushed the dirt back into the hole and pressed it flat with his hands. Then, he covered the place carefully. The treasure was gone from sight. Achan stood and looked at the ground. Nothing seemed different. No one had followed him. No one had entered the tent. He believed his secret was safe. A few days later, Joshua began preparing to attack another city. It was called Ai, and it appeared much smaller than Jericho. Joshua sent scouts to examine the city and learn how many soldiers protected it. The scouts returned feeling very confident. "There is no reason to send the entire army," they told Joshua. "The people of Ai are few. Send only 2,000 or 3,000 men." Joshua followed their advice. About 3,000 Israelite soldiers prepared for battle. Achan watched them leave the camp. Perhaps he felt no fear. His treasure was still hidden.
Before we continue, these videos takes hours and hours to make. Please like and subscribe and comment which country you are watching this from.
No one had spoken about the missing robe, silver, or gold. Joshua had not questioned him. Each quiet day made Achan feel safer. The army marched toward Ai, expecting an easy victory. They had watched Jericho's walls fall before them. A small city did not seem dangerous, but when they reached Ai, everything changed. The soldiers of Ai charged out of the city. They attacked the Israelites and forced them backward. Fear spread through Israel's army. Their confidence disappeared. By the time the survivors escaped, 36 Israelite soldiers were dead. The defeated army returned to camp in shock. Men who had left expecting a quick victory now came back covered in dust. Some carried injured friends. Others arrived without the men who had marched beside them. Only days earlier, Israel had watched Jericho fall without losing a single soldier. Now they had been defeated by a much smaller city. Achan saw the survivors enter the camp. He heard the families crying when they learned who had died. He saw people searching for their fathers, sons, and brothers. The entire camp filled with fear. The treasure remained beneath his tent. Achan still said nothing. News of the defeat reached Joshua. He tore his clothes and fell face down before the Ark of the Covenant. The elders of Israel joined him. They threw dust upon their heads. Joshua could not understand what had happened. "Why did you bring us across the Jordan?" he cried. "Was it only to hand us over to our enemies? The people of Canaan will hear about this defeat. They will surround us and destroy us." Then God answered Joshua. "Stand up," the Lord said. "Israel has sinned." The defeat had not happened because I was stronger. It had not happened because Joshua sent too few soldiers. Someone in the camp had broken the command given at Jericho. "Someone has stolen the devoted things," God said. "He has hidden them among his own possessions. That is why Israel cannot stand against its enemies." Achan's secret was no longer secret before God. The hidden robe had not brought him comfort. The silver had not made him rich. The gold had not given him power. While the treasure remained buried and untouched, 36 men had died. God told Joshua what to do next. Every person in the camp had to prepare for the following morning. Then the tribes would come forward one at a time. God would reveal where the sin was hidden. The message spread throughout the camp. Tomorrow, the guilty person would be found. That night, Achan lay inside his tent. The stolen treasure was only a short distance beneath him. He knew Joshua was searching for the person who had taken it. Achan could have gone to Joshua. He could have confessed before the search began. He could have uncovered the treasure and carried it into the open. But Achan remained silent. Morning came. Joshua gathered all Israel before him. Thousands of people stood watching as the search began. First, each tribe came forward. There were 12 tribes in Israel. Achan stood among the men of Judah, waiting. Perhaps he tried to control his breathing. Perhaps he told himself that the search could never find one man among so many people. Then the result was announced. The tribe of Judah had been chosen. The crowd watched as the other tribes stepped back. Only Judah remained before Joshua. The search became smaller. The clans of Judah came forward one by one. Achan stood with the clan of the Zerahites. Again, the result was announced. The clan of the Zerahites had been chosen. Achan's family line was now standing alone. The search continued. Each family within the clan was called forward. Achan watched as the number of men around him became smaller. Then, the family of Zabdi was chosen. There was nowhere left to disappear among the crowd. Finally, the men of Zabdi's family stepped forward one at a time. Each name brought the truth closer. Every eye watched. The camp had become silent. Then the final name was chosen, Achan, son of Carmi. Thousands of faces turned toward him. The secret he had buried beneath his tent now stood uncovered before the entire nation. Joshua looked directly at Achan. His voice was firm, but he did not shout. "My son, give glory to the Lord, the God of Israel. Tell me what you have done. Do not hide it from me." Achan could not escape. He could not blame another soldier. He could not pretend that he knew nothing. At last, he confessed. "It is true," Achan said. "I have sinned against the Lord, the God of Israel." Then he explained everything. "When I looked among the objects taken from Jericho, I saw a beautiful robe from Shinar. I also saw 200 shekels of silver and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels. I wanted them, so I took them. They are hidden in the ground inside my tent. The silver is underneath everything else." The entire camp heard his confession. Joshua immediately sent messengers toward Achan's tent. The men ran through the camp and entered it. They moved aside the coverings on the floor and began digging. Achan waited before Joshua. The messengers soon struck something beneath the dirt. They cleared the soil away and found the robe. Beneath it lay the gold. At the bottom of the hole, just as Achan had said, they found the silver. The treasure had been hidden perfectly from people. It had never been hidden from God. The messengers carried the stolen objects out of the tent. They brought them to Joshua. The beautiful robe no longer looked like a prize. The silver no longer seemed valuable. The gold no longer promised a better life. These objects were proof of Achan's choice. Because he had wanted them, he had broken God's command. Because he had hidden them, all Israel had suffered. Joshua looked at Achan. "Why have you brought this trouble upon us?" he asked. "The Lord will bring trouble upon you today." The Israelites took Achan to a nearby valley. They also brought his household, his animals, his tent, everything he owned, and the objects stolen from Jericho. The people gathered around the valley as the truth about Achan became known to everyone. He had entered Jericho as a soldier in a victorious army. He had returned believing he was secretly rich. Now everything he owned had been brought out into the open. The judgment was carried out. Stones fell upon Achan and everything connected to his crime. Afterward, the Israelites burned what remained. Then they raised a great pile of stones over the place. The valley received a new name that day. It was called the Valley of Achor, the Valley of Trouble. For many years, the pile of stones remained there. Anyone who passed it would remember what had happened. They would remember the man who saw what was forbidden. Achan thought one secret choice would affect only him. Instead, it brought fear and pain upon the whole camp. He thought the dirt beneath his tent could hide his actions, but every step of the search moved closer to his name. First Judah, then the Zerahites, then Zabdi, then Achan. The robe was destroyed. The silver was lost. The gold gave him nothing. Everything he had risked his life to possess disappeared in a single day. Only the warning remained. After the hidden sin was removed, the Lord's anger turned away from Israel. The people would soon return to Ai. This time, they would not run. This time, God would give them victory. But Achan would never see it. His secret treasure had promised him a richer life. Instead, It buried his name beneath a mountain of stones. 120,000 men were killed in one day. 200,000 women and children were dragged away. And while the kingdom bled, King Ahaz offered his own son to pagan gods. But that was only the beginning. His own people would soon follow the darkness he had embraced. Ahaz became king of Judah when he was 20 years old. He ruled from Jerusalem, and he could now control the government and army. He could also change how people worshipped, and that power soon harmed the kingdom. Ahaz began making idols for the Baals. These were the gods worshipped by many people outside Judah. He burned incense to them in the valley of Ben Hinnom. He also worshipped at many high places across the land. These were worship sites built on hills and under large trees. Then Ahaz did something much worse, making one of his sons pass through fire. Other nations followed this cruel practice, but it was forbidden in Judah. Ahaz still chose to do it, and his people began following his example. Danger soon came from the north, when Rezin of Syria joined Pekah of Israel. Their kingdoms had strong armies, and both kings wanted Ahaz removed. They joined their forces, then began attacking Judah together. Pekah's army attacked Judah first, killing 120,000 soldiers in one day. Judah lost a large part of its army, leaving many towns with fewer defenders. 3 important men were also killed during the battle. One was Maaseiah, the son of Ahaz. Another was Azrikam, the man who managed the royal palace. The third was Elkanah, one of the king's highest officers. A warrior from Israel named Zitri killed all 3. The army of Israel then attacked towns across Judah. Its soldiers captured 200,000 women and children. They also took food, clothing, money, and anything else they could carry. The prisoners were forced to walk north with the army. The soldiers planned to take them to Samaria and keep them as slaves. The captives had lost their homes and family members and now faced slavery. A prophet named Oded stopped the army before it entered Samaria. Oded said God had allowed Israel to defeat Judah. However, that victory did not give them the right to enslave the captives. Oded also warned the soldiers about their own sins. Israel was guilty too, and taking slaves would make its guilt worse. Several leaders agreed with Oded and blocked the army from entering Samaria. The soldiers placed the captives and stolen goods before the leaders. The leaders used those goods to help the prisoners. They gave them clothes, sandals, food, and water. They also treated the people who had been hurt. Some captives were too weak to continue walking. The leaders placed them on donkeys, then brought everyone toward Jericho. Jericho stood near the land of Judah. The captives were released there, and the leaders returned to Samaria. Judah was still in danger, as Rezin and Pekah brought their armies to Jerusalem. They surrounded the city, hoping to capture Jerusalem and remove Ahaz from power. News of their plan reached the palace. Ahaz and the people of Jerusalem were terrified. The Bible says their hearts shook like trees in the wind. They knew both armies were moving toward them at once. The 2 kings wanted to tear Judah apart and divide its land. They planned to place another man on the throne. He was the son of Tabeel, though the Bible does not give his name. Ahaz would lose both his kingdom and his crown. During this attack, God sent the prophet Isaiah to meet Ahaz. Isaiah brought his young son with him. They found the king near the water channel of the upper pool. Ahaz was checking the city's water supply, while the enemies stood outside. Isaiah told Ahaz to stay calm and not fear Rezin or Pekah. Their anger looked dangerous, but their plan would fail. They would not break into Jerusalem or place their own king on its throne. Isaiah compared the kings to 2 pieces of smoking wood. They could still make smoke, but their fire was almost gone. Ahaz saw 2 powerful enemies outside his walls. God saw 2 kings whose plan was already failing. God gave Ahaz a clear reason to trust this message. Syria was ruled from Damascus, and Rezin was only its king. Israel was ruled from Samaria, and Pekah was only its king. Neither man could stand against what God had decided. Isaiah also said Israel would be broken within 65 years. The threat looked immediate and powerful to Ahaz. Isaiah told him it would not last. Isaiah then warned Ahaz about his own faith. If the king did not stand firm in faith, he would not stand at all. Ahaz had to choose what he trusted. He could trust God's promise, or he could search for help somewhere else. God even allowed Ahaz to ask for a sign. The sign could come from anywhere, whether deep below or high above. Ahaz could ask for something clear and impossible to miss. God was giving him a chance to see that the promise was true.
Before we continue, these videos takes hours and hours to make. Please like and subscribe and comment which country you are watching this from.
Ahaz refused, saying he would not test God. His words sounded respectful, but he still would not accept the help offered to him. Isaiah answered with a message for the whole royal family. Isaiah said God would give a sign anyway. A young woman would have a son and call him Emmanuel. The name Emmanuel means God is with us. Before the child grew old enough to know right from wrong, both enemy lands would fall. The message also carried a warning for Judah. The king of Assyria would come against the land. Ahaz saw Assyria as a possible rescue, but Isaiah described it as another danger. The empire would not enter Judah as a kind friend. Isaiah described armies coming from far away. They would spread through valleys, caves, fields, and rocky places. No part of the land would feel safe from them. Assyria's power would reach much farther than Ahaz expected. The attack would also ruin farms and vineyards. Fields that once held crops would become covered with thorns. People would enter some areas with bows and arrows because the land would be wild. Only a small number of animals would remain. Families would survive on simple food like milk and honey. There would be plenty of open grass, but many farms would be empty. Isaiah's warning showed what Assyrian power could do. The help Ahaz wanted could leave his own kingdom poor and broken. The walls held, and the two armies could not enter. Yet Rezin still took the port city of Elath. He drove out the people of Judah who lived there. Losing the port also hurt Judah's trade with other lands. More enemies attacked while Judah was weak. The Edomites came from the south and took more prisoners. Judah did not have enough soldiers to stop every attack. Each new loss made the kingdom easier to invade. The Philistines attacked from the west. They captured Beth Shemesh, Aijalon, and several other towns. Their people moved into these places and stayed there. This meant Judah had lost land, homes, farms, and important roads. Ahaz could not defeat all these enemies by himself. He decided to ask Assyria for help. Assyria was the strongest empire nearby, with an army far larger than Judah's. Tiglath-Pileser was the king of Assyria. Ahaz sent messengers with a desperate request, calling himself the king's servant and son. He begged Tiglath-Pileser to save him from Syria and Israel. Ahaz also sent him a huge gift. He took silver and gold from the temple in Jerusalem. He took more treasure from his own palace. Then he sent all of it to Assyria as payment for help. Tiglath-Pileser accepted the treasure. His army marched against Damascus, the capital of Syria. The Assyrians captured the city and killed King Rezin. Syria could no longer continue its attack against Judah. The Assyrians also captured many people from Damascus. They forced those people to leave and sent them to Kir. Removing the people helped Assyria control the conquered city. Damascus had lost its king, its army, and many of its people. The plan saved Ahaz from one enemy, but it placed him under Assyria. Tiglath-Pileser did not treat Ahaz as an equal king. He knew Judah was weak and needed Assyrian support. Ahaz soon asked Assyria for help again. This time, Tiglath-Pileser did not rescue him. He came to Judah and made life harder for Ahaz. Assyria began taking advantage of the kingdom instead of protecting it. Ahaz tried to satisfy the Assyrian king with more treasure. He took more wealth from the temple and palace. He also took valuable things from the leaders of Judah. Then he gave everything to Tiglath-Pileser. The payment changed nothing, and Assyria kept putting pressure on Ahaz. The Edomites and Philistines still held captives and towns. Judah had lost much of its wealth, yet it was no safer. Ahaz then turned to the gods of Damascus. Syria had caused Judah great pain during the war. Ahaz believed its gods had made the Syrian army strong. He decided to offer sacrifices to them, hoping they would help him. He said, "The gods of Syria helped their kings. I will offer sacrifices to them so they may help me." Ahaz began worshipping the gods of a city Assyria had defeated. That choice brought even more trouble to Judah. Ahaz traveled to Damascus to meet Tiglath-Pileser. While there, he saw a large altar and liked its design. Ahaz wanted an altar just like it in Jerusalem. He made a drawing of the altar and wrote down its design. Then he sent the plan to Urijah, a priest in Jerusalem. Ahaz ordered him to build the new altar before he returned. Urijah followed the order and finished the work. When Ahaz returned, the altar was ready inside the temple area. He walked to it and began making sacrifices. He burned offerings and poured drink offerings upon it. He also placed the blood of sacrifices on the altar. Ahaz then gave Urijah more orders. The new altar would be used for the daily sacrifices. Priests would burn the morning and evening offerings there. They would also use it for sacrifices brought by the people. The bronze altar already used in the temple was moved aside. It no longer stood in its main place. Ahaz said he would use it when he wanted guidance. Urijah obeyed everything the king told him to do. Ahaz continued changing the temple. He removed the side panels from several stands. He also removed the basins that rested upon them. Priests used these basins for washing during their work. There was also a much larger basin called the sea. It stood on 12 bronze oxen. Ahaz removed it from those oxen and placed it on stone. He was taking apart the objects used for worship in the temple. He changed another covered area used on the Sabbath. Ahaz made these changes because of the king of Assyria. A foreign ruler was now shaping what happened in Jerusalem. The trouble around Judah continued, but Ahaz did not change his ways. Instead, he became even more unfaithful to God. He gathered the sacred objects from inside the temple, then he cut them into pieces. Those objects could no longer be used by the priests. Ahaz then shut the temple doors. People could no longer enter the temple and bring their sacrifices. Ahaz built new altars on the street corners of Jerusalem. People could use them to offer sacrifices to other gods. These altars stood across the city, where everyone could see them. Ahaz was making foreign worship part of daily life. He did the same thing throughout Judah. Ahaz built high places in every city. People burned incense there and worshipped other gods. What began with the king had now spread across his whole kingdom. Ahaz ruled Judah for 16 years. He was 36 years old when he died. One wrong move, and every priest would die. King Saul ordered his soldiers to kill the priests, but everyone refused. They knew the order had gone too far. But one man stepped forward, Doeg, and he was willing to do what nobody else did. Why would a servant of the king kill an entire town full of priests? To find out, we must go back to one of the most blood-chilling stories in all of Scripture. Israel was ruled by King Saul, but there was a serious problem inside the kingdom. Saul wanted David dead, and anyone who helped David could face the king's anger. David had once been welcomed by Saul after killing the giant Goliath. He later won many battles, and the people began to praise him more than Saul. Saul became jealous, attacked David, and eventually forced him to run for his life. Saul now believed David wanted to take the kingdom from him. He watched his servants closely and became angry with anyone who seemed to support David. One of Saul's servants was Doeg. He was an Edomite, a man from Edom. Doeg worked inside Saul's kingdom and was in charge of the king's herdsmen. One day, Doeg was in Nob, a small town where many of Israel's priests lived. While Doeg was there, David suddenly entered the town alone, hungry, and without a weapon. Ahimelech, the priest of Nob, came out and asked why David had no men with him. He knew David as a trusted fighter in Saul's house, not as someone running from the king. David needed help, so he told Ahimelech a story that was not true. David claimed that Saul had sent him on a secret job, while his men waited elsewhere. Ahimelech believed him because he had not heard that Saul now wanted David dead. The priest saw a servant of the king who needed food, not an enemy hiding from Saul. Doeg was present as the meeting took place, and he learned what David needed. Ahimelech had only holy bread, which had been placed before God during worship. Since no other bread was available, the priest gave this food to David. David then asked whether Ahimelech had a spear or sword that he could take. The priest said only one weapon was there, the sword of Goliath the giant. After David killed Goliath, the great sword had been wrapped in cloth and kept at Nob.
It is yours.
Ahimelech brought out the weapon, and David quickly asked him to hand it over. Doeg now knew that a priest had given Saul's enemy both food and a sword. He also knew the weapon was famous because it came from David's greatest victory. The sword had been kept behind the special clothing worn by the priest during worship. When Ahimelech offered it, David said there was no other sword like it. He left Nob carrying a weapon that everyone in Israel could connect to his name. David noticed Doeg before leaving, and he knew that Doeg worked for Saul. David later said that he expected the Edomite to tell the king what happened. Still, David could not remain in Nob, so he took the supplies and continued his escape. Doeg was left with facts that no other servant of Saul had seen. David had entered Nob alone, received holy bread, and taken the sword of Goliath. Scripture says nothing about Doeg's next actions until he appears again before the king. Saul was sitting under a tree with a spear in his hand, surrounded by his servants. Although these men came from his own people, the king believed they were hiding information from him. He accused them of caring more about David than they cared about their king. Saul asked whether David would give them land or make them leaders in his army. He also complained that no one told him when his son Jonathan helped David. Saul spoke as if every silent servant had joined a plan to remove him. The king said that no servant felt sorry for him or warned him about danger. He claimed David was waiting to attack, although David was running away from Saul. The king wanted one of the silent men to give him a name. The servants gave no answer, but Doeg stepped forward with the news from Nob. "I saw David go to Ahimelech," he said before Saul and the gathered men. Ahimelech asked the Lord for help, gave him food, and gave him Goliath's sword. Saul believed Doeg's report, then ordered Ahimelech and his family of priests to appear. The king did not send for one man alone, because his anger reached the whole priestly family. When they arrived, Doeg's words became the main charge placed against them. Ahimelech answered Saul's call by saying, "Here I am, my lord." He still spoke to Saul as his king, even while facing a serious charge. The other priests stood with him, waiting to learn why they had all been called. Saul asked Ahimelech why he had joined David and helped him rise against the king. He named the food, the sword, and the help that Ahimelech had asked from God. In Saul's mind, these acts proved that the priest had chosen David's side. Ahimelech answered that David was known as one of Saul's most trusted servants. The priest also said this was not the first time he had asked God for David. He had done it before, when David still served openly inside Saul's house. Ahimelech ended by saying that neither he nor his family knew anything about David's escape. His answer explained why the meeting at Nob had not looked wrong to him. David had used Saul's name, and Ahimelech believed that he was still serving the king. Saul refused to accept the defense, because he had already chosen to believe Doeg's report.
I swear it.
"You will die, Ahimelech," he said. you and your father's whole family." The king then ordered his guards to turn and kill the priests of the Lord. Every guard refused to carry out the command, even though Saul could punish them. These soldiers had obeyed him in war, but they would not raise their hands against unarmed priests. Their refusal stopped the killing for a moment, but Saul quickly turned toward Doeg. "You turn and kill the priests," Saul ordered. Doeg obeyed. He struck down 85 priests that day, each wearing the special linen clothes of a priest.
Want your children to learn Bible verses without giving them more screen time?
Instead of endless scrolling, your kids can color, play, and have fun while growing closer to God and learning His Word. Over 70 pages filled with exciting Bible challenges. And if your kids sometimes get bored during church, bring the book along and give them something fun to do. You can check out the book using the link below. Available now on Amazon.
The men had come because their king called them, and none had been found guilty. Saul gave the order, but Doeg became the person who carried it out. The killing before Saul was only the first part of the attack. Doeg also put Nob, the town of the priests, to the sword. The judgment now reached people who never stood before Saul and never heard the charge against Ahimelech. Men and women were killed, along with children, babies, cattle, donkeys, and sheep. The Bible includes the animals to show how fully Nob was destroyed. The town where Doeg had seen David receive help became empty because of the information he gave Saul. One priest escaped the attack, and his name was Abiathar, a son of Ahimelech. He left Nob and ran to David, carrying a special priestly garment called an ephod. Abiathar had lost his father, his family, and the town where he had served. When Abiathar arrived, he told David that Saul had killed the priests of the Lord. David understood that Doeg's report had started the attack, and he accepted his own part. He admitted knowing that Doeg would tell Saul, yet he had still asked Ahimelech for help. David told Abiathar to remain with him, because Saul now wanted both of them dead. "Stay with me, and do not be afraid," David told the surviving priest. "The person seeking your life is also seeking mine, and you will be safe with me." Abiathar accepted the offer and remained beside David during Saul's search. Abiathar later carried the ephod with him when David went to a town called Keilah. Saul learned where David was and prepared to trap him inside its walls. When David heard about Saul's plan, he asked Abiathar to bring the ephod. Earlier, David had saved the city Keilah from the Philistines, and now he was staying there. But when Saul came after him, David wondered if the people of Keilah would betray him to save themselves. Saul still believed the town would hand David over once the royal army arrived. Through the priest, David asked God whether Saul would come and attack the town. He also asked whether the people of Keilah would hand him over to Saul. God warned David that Saul was coming and that the people would give him up. David and his 600 men left Keilah before Saul reached them, so the king's plan failed. They spread out across the land, making it harder for Saul to trap them. Abiathar had given David the help needed to escape another attack from the king. After the destruction of Nob, the Bible records nothing else about Doeg's life. It does not say whether Saul rewarded him, punished him, or gave him greater power. Doeg disappears from the history, but his name returns in a song written by David. The song is Psalm 52. David begins by asking why a powerful person would be proud of doing evil. He describes the person's tongue as a sharp knife. Soon, the priestly family stood before the king, facing a charge built from those words. Psalm 52 says, "This person loves evil instead of good, and lies instead of truth." Doeg's report included real events, but it did not explain that David had fooled Ahimelech. Saul heard what the priest had given David, without hearing why the priest believed him. The song next warns that God will bring the evil person down and remove him. It says the wealth he trusted will not protect him when that judgment comes. Any place Doeg gained beside Saul could not give him safety from God. David ends the psalm with a very different picture, calling himself a green olive tree. Such a tree remains alive, grows strong, and continues to produce fruit. David believed God's love would keep him alive, even while Saul and Doeg worked against him. He promises to thank God and wait for God's name, because he believes it is good. The psalm therefore moves away from Doeg before its final.
Seek God, or you will die!
Azariah gave a simple warning to one of the most powerful kings. If the nation turned away from God, there would be no peace, no safety, no escape. Cities would fight cities, nations would destroy each other, and terror would spread everywhere. The people in the city swore they would seek God, but there was a terrifying price for refusing. Anyone who broke the promise would be put to death. Azariah's warning made the whole nation either choose God or execution. It was the beginning of one of the most terrifying promises in all of Scripture. Judah had once been part of one kingdom, but years earlier the nation had divided. Israel was in the north, while Asa ruled Judah in the south. Idols and false worship had spread across the land, and Asa was trying to remove them. Then a huge Cushite army marched against Judah. Asa gathered his army. Before the battle, Asa stood with his soldiers facing a Cushite army that included nearly 1 million soldiers and 300 chariots. He knew that Judah's smaller army could not win by its own strength. Before the battle began, he prayed, "Lord, there is no one like you to help the powerless against the mighty. Help us." The Lord answered that prayer. The Cushites were defeated, and Asa's army chased them toward Gerar. The enemy could not recover. The pursuit continued into the region around Gerar. The cities there were filled with fear as Asa's army approached. Judah's soldiers carried away supplies from those cities, then entered the camps where the livestock were kept. They took large numbers of sheep and camels before turning back toward Jerusalem. The battle had ended, the enemy had been scattered, and the army could finally begin the journey home. Judah's soldiers returned with sheep, goats, camels, and other goods. The victory showed that God had rescued Judah from an army it could not defeat alone. As Asa and his soldiers marched back toward Jerusalem, a man named Azariah came out to meet them on the road. Azariah was the son of Oded. He was not introduced as a commander, an official, or a man with political power. The Bible simply says that the Spirit of God came upon him. God had given him a message for Asa and the returning army. But Azariah did not come to praise the king. He came to warn him. "Listen to me, Asa, and all Judah and Benjamin," Azariah said. "The Lord is with you when you are with him. If you seek him, he will be found by you. But if you forsake him, he will forsake you." 2 Chronicles 15:2. Azariah then reminded Asa what had happened when the people lived without God's guidance. For a long time, Israel was without the true God, without a priest to teach, and without the law, he said. Azariah described how serious the problem had become. In those days it was not safe to travel, he said. One nation was crushed by another, and one city by another, because God troubled them with every kind of distress. But when they were in trouble, they turned back to the Lord. Azariah continued, "They searched for him, and he allowed them to find him. But as for you, be strong and do not give up, for your work will be rewarded." Azariah's words placed a clear choice before Asa. The rest of Asa's reign would show whether he remained faithful after the danger had passed. One prayer and one victory were not enough. The king had to remain faithful after the battle. Azariah was not condemning Asa's earlier actions. Asa had already removed some foreign altars, commanded Judah to seek the Lord, and trusted God during the invasion. Azariah was telling him to continue. Asa had started the work, but he had not yet finished it. The foreign enemy was gone, but idols were still standing inside Judah. Azariah warned Asa that these idols were also a danger to the nation. During the period Azariah described, the people had stopped listening to God's law. They had no faithful teachers to guide them, and they no longer knew clearly what was right. As the people moved farther from God, the nation became unstable. God's law taught the people how to worship, how to treat one another, and how justice should be carried out. Asa had already started removing idols from Judah, but some were still standing. Azariah told him not to stop until the work was complete. The Cushite army had been defeated, but Judah still had a serious problem inside its own borders. False worship remained in the land. Asa accepted the warning as a message from God and took courage. He then began the next stage of his reforms. Some of the idols stood in public places. Others were connected to customs that people had followed for many years. Asa did not allow them to remain simply because people were used to them. The nation could not claim to worship the Lord while continuing to honor other gods. Asa traveled through Judah and Benjamin and removed the idols that remained. He then entered the hill country of Ephraim and removed the idols from the towns under his control. The reform moved from town to town. Orders reached the smaller villages as well as the main cities. Public idols were taken down, foreign altars were destroyed, and objects connected to false worship were removed. Asa continued until the command had reached every part of the land under his authority. Removing idols was only part of the work. Asa also had to restore the proper worship of the Lord.
Wow, and you finished all the puzzles too.
Every page is filled with fun Bible activities, coloring pages, puzzles, word searches, and memory verses that make learning God's Word exciting.
If you like this Bible coloring book with loads of puzzles for you or your children, click the link in the description below.
In front of the temple in Jerusalem stood the Lord's altar. This was where the people brought their sacrifices, but the altar had been neglected and needed repair. Asa ordered it to be restored. The altar stood before the main entrance of the temple. It was central to the public worship of Judah because the people offered their sacrifices there. Repairing it showed that Asa wanted worship to continue according to God's law. The reform was not complete when the idols fell. The people also needed a restored place where they could worship the Lord together. Asa was therefore doing two things at once. He was removing the false worship that had entered Judah, and he was restoring the worship that God's law required. News of Asa's actions spread beyond Judah. People in the northern kingdom heard that he was removing idols and restoring worship in Jerusalem. They also heard how the Lord had helped him defeat the Cushite army. The northern kingdom had moved away from worship at the temple in Jerusalem. Its rulers had led the people toward other places and other forms of worship. People in the north could see the difference between the two kingdoms. In the north, false worship continued. In Judah, Asa was destroying idols and repairing the Lord's altar. Many people from the tribes of Ephraim, Manasseh, and Simeon decided to leave the north and move into Judah. They saw that the Lord was with Asa, and they wanted to live in a kingdom that was seeking God. This was a serious decision. The northern and southern kingdoms were rivals. Moving into Judah meant leaving homes, land, and familiar communities. But these families believed that worshiping the Lord was more important than remaining where they were. As more people arrived, Asa called for a great gathering in Jerusalem. It took place in the 3rd month of the 15th year of his reign. This gathering brought Asa's work into public view. Removing idols had changed the towns. Repairing the altar had restored the place of worship. Now the people themselves had to decide whether they would seek the Lord. Asa could issue commands as king, but the covenant required the nation to make a clear promise before God. Messengers carried the order through the kingdom. People left their towns and villages and traveled toward Jerusalem. The gathering included the people of Judah and Benjamin, along with those who had moved south from Ephraim, Manasseh, and Simeon. The roads leading to Jerusalem filled with families making the journey. Farmers left their fields, shepherds left their flocks, and parents traveled with their children. The gathering was not limited to priests, soldiers, or officials. People from across the kingdom came to stand together before the Lord. For years, the tribes had lived on opposite sides of a divided kingdom. Now they stood together in Jerusalem for the same reason. They had come to seek the Lord. The people brought animals captured during the war against the Cushites. They offered 700 cattle and 7,000 sheep and goats as sacrifices. The large number of sacrifices showed that this was not a small local ceremony. People from across the kingdom had come to take part. The animals had been captured after the battle, but the people did not keep all of them. They offered part of what they had received to the Lord, showing that the victory belonged to Him. Smoke rose from the repaired altar as the sacrifices were offered. The temple courts were filled with people from across the kingdom. Soldiers who had survived the battle stood beside families who had waited for them to return. People born in Judah stood beside families who had recently arrived from the north. Then Asa led the nation into a covenant with God. A covenant was a binding promise. The people promised to seek the Lord, the God of their ancestors, with all their heart and all their soul. They were not making a temporary promise for a time of war. They were placing the whole nation under a serious commitment to obey God. To seek the Lord meant more than asking for help during a crisis. It meant rejecting idols, listening to God's law, and worshiping Him alone. The words, "with all their heart and all their soul," showed that the promise had to be complete. The people were not agreeing to give God only part of their loyalty. The covenant also included a severe punishment. Anyone who refused to seek the Lord would be put to death. The rule applied to everyone, whether important or unknown, man or woman. This punishment belonged to the national covenant of ancient Judah. In that kingdom, the law of the nation and its worship of God were closely connected. Refusing the covenant was treated as rebellion against both God and the nation. The people accepted the covenant and swore an oath before the Lord. They did not make the promise quietly. They shouted with a loud voice. Trumpets sounded, and rams' horns were blown throughout the gathering. Everyone could hear the nation declare its loyalty to God. The people rejoiced as they made the oath. They were not only following an order from Asa. The Bible says they made the promise with their whole heart. They wanted to seek God, and they did so eagerly. The Lord allowed them to find Him, just as Azariah had promised, and the Lord gave them rest on every side.
Seize them!
David's guards moved before Baana could speak again. Only a few moments earlier, Baana had walked in confident, expecting a reward. He had traveled all night and brought in the head of his own king he had murdered. Baana believed that head would save his life. He believed it would earn him money. He believed it would give him a place in David's army. Instead, it became the evidence that sentenced him to death. Baana and his brother Reshab were dragged from David's palace. The men were terrified. The entire city gathered to see what was happening. The guards pushed the two men in front of everybody, and then they died. The guards killed them, cut off their hands and feet, and hung their bodies beside the pool in Hebron. The entire city could see them. But this was not simply the execution of two murderers. It was the bloody ending to one of the most chilling acts of betrayal in all of Scripture. Israel had entered a dangerous time. King Saul was dead. He and 3 of his sons had been killed in a battle against the Philistines. The nation had lost its king and several members of the royal family in one day. One remaining son, Ishbosheth, became king over most of the tribes of Judah. The remaining tribe was led by a man named David. Israel now had 2 kings, and their armies fought for control of the nation. Baana served as a captain in Ishbosheth's army. From his position, he watched David become stronger, while Ishbosheth lost battles, soldiers, and land. Baana knew that he served the losing side, but he still hoped Ishbosheth's general, Abner, could stop David. Ishbosheth depended heavily on Abner. Abner had helped him become king and controlled the loyalty of the army as long as Abner supported him. Baana believed the kingdom might survive. Then Abner abandoned Ishbosheth and promised to help David rule all Israel. Before he could finish this task, Abner was killed. His death left Ishbosheth without a strong general, and his soldiers became afraid. To Baana, the meaning was clear. David would probably win, and Baana had fought against David. He did not know whether David would forgive him. That fear made Baana begin thinking about how Ishbosheth's death could protect his own future. David might still remember that Baana had fought against him if he left the army. Baana wanted to prove that he could help David. The soldiers in Ishbosheth's army became afraid and spoke quietly about David's growing army. Some soldiers left their camps during the night because they did not want to be there when David won the war. They took their weapons and families with them. Baana began thinking about King Ishbosheth. He was the only other king in Israel. If Ishbosheth died, David could become king over the whole nation. The northern tribes would no longer have a king to support against David. Baana then thought about killing Ishbosheth himself. He knew that killing his own king would be murder. Ishbosheth trusted Baana because Baana was one of his captains. However, Baana believed that the murder might save him from David. Baana thought David would be pleased if Ishbosheth died. David would no longer need to fight another war. He could take control of Israel more quickly. Baana believed David might reward the man who made that possible. Baana tried to make the murder seem right. He told himself that Ishbosheth had already lost the war. He also told himself that the murder would stop more soldiers from dying. But Baana mainly wanted to protect his own life. Baana needed someone to help him, so he decided to speak with his brother, Rechab. The brothers met in a place where no soldiers could hear them. Baana first spoke about the soldiers who were leaving, then explained that David's army would probably win the war. David is going to win, Rechab said. What will happen to men like us? Baana had already prepared an answer. Ishbosheth is the only king standing against David, Baana said. If we kill him, David will know that we helped him. He will reward us instead of punishing us. Rechab was not sure about the plan. David may call it murder, Rechab said. Ishbosheth is our king. Baana did not listen to his brother's warning. He said that Ishbosheth was David's last enemy in Israel. Since David had fought against Saul's family for years, Baana did not believe that he would punish them for killing Ishbosheth. Baana continued talking until Rechab agreed, and he now felt more certain about the plan. He believed that choosing David was the smartest way to stay alive. The brothers needed a reason to enter Ishbosheth's house. Baana decided that they would pretend to collect grain for their soldiers. Army captains often needed food for their men, so the guards would not think that this request was strange. Baana also decided to enter the house during the hottest part of the day, when people often rested. The guards might be tired, and fewer people would be walking through the house. When the day came, Baana tried to look calm. He did not want his soldiers to know that anything was wrong. After speaking very little to Rechab, Baana traveled with him to Mahanaim. Ishbosheth lived there. During the journey, Baana repeated each part of the plan. They would enter the house, pass the guards, and find the king. Then they would kill him and take proof of his death to David. Baana knew that the plan was dangerous. A guard might become suspicious and stop them. Ishbosheth might call for help. Even if they killed him, soldiers from Mahanaim might catch them before they reached David. Baana walked toward the king's house as if he had normal work to do, keeping a steady speed. He did not look at Rechab because he did not want the guards to notice their fear. The guards knew that Baana and Rechab were captains in the king's army. They allowed the brothers to enter the house. A woman near the entrance had been working with wheat. The heat made her tired, and she fell asleep. Baana quietly walked past her. Rechab followed him. The house was quiet enough for Baana to hear his own steps as he passed the grain and walked toward Ishbosheth's private room. Baana entered Ishbosheth's room, where the king was resting on his bed. There was no guard inside the room, because Ishbosheth was not expecting his own captains to attack him.
Before we continue, these videos takes hours and hours to make. Please like and subscribe and comment which country you are watching this from.
Baana moved closer to the bed, and Rechab stood beside him. But neither man said anything. Baana struck Ishbosheth in the stomach. Rechab also struck him. Since Ishbosheth had been sleeping, he could not defend himself. The brothers cut off Ishbosheth's head. The brothers killed him on his own bed, and Baana wrapped it so they could carry it to Hebron. Baana and Rechab left the house before anyone found the body. Baana expected someone to shout or follow them. No one did. The brothers walked through the quiet streets and left Mahanaim. They traveled south through the Jordan Valley during the night because the road led toward Hebron, and the darkness made them harder to see. Baana was afraid that Ishbosheth's soldiers would follow them. Every sound made him look behind him. The head became harder to carry as the brothers grew tired, but Baana tried not to think about the dead king. He thought about David's reward instead, which gave him a reason to continue walking. Baana thought about entering David's court before anyone else reported the murder. He would put Ishbosheth's head in front of David. David would then know that his only rival was dead and that the war was almost over. Baana also planned what he would say. He would not call the killing a murder. He would say that it was God's punishment against Saul's family. Baana believed that these words would make David accept what he had done. When they entered Hebron, Baana saw David's soldiers in the streets, including some who might have fought against him before. Baana believed they would soon accept him as one of David's officers. Baana and Rechab went to the house where David was staying, and the guards saw that they were army captains with important news. The guards allowed them to enter. Baana stood in front of David, believing that David would soon become king over all Israel, and that Ishbosheth's head would prove his loyalty. He unwrapped the head and placed it in front of David. "Here is the head of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul," Baana said. "Saul was your enemy and tried to kill you. Today, the Lord has given my king revenge against Saul and his family." Baana expected David to feel surprised and thankful, but instead, David looked angry. David did not praise Baana. Instead, he told him about a messenger who had brought news of Saul's death. The messenger claimed that he killed Saul and expected David to reward him for killing an enemy. But David had ordered the messenger's death. Saul had been the king chosen by God. David believed the messenger had committed a serious crime. Baana understood why David was telling him this story. The messenger had expected a reward for a king's death, but David had punished him instead. Baana became afraid. He wanted to explain why Ishbosheth's death was different. Although Ishbosheth was weak and David had gained from the murder, Baana saw that David did not care about those excuses. David believed that murder was wrong, even when the murder helped him. Baana had not understood this before killing Ishbosheth. David looked at Baana and Rechab. "You are wicked men," David said. "You killed an innocent man in his own house and on his own bed. I will make you answer for his blood." David ordered his guards to arrest the brothers. The guards seized Baana and Rechab before they could escape. The guards killed both brothers. They cut off their hands and feet. Then they hung their bodies beside the pool in Hebron. David wanted everyone to know that he would punish people who murdered a king. What if, in just a few hours, your whole life fell apart? Your family, dead. Your servants, gone. Your skin slowly peeling off. And your closest friends all put the blame on you. Then, when you cry out to God for answers, A terrifying whirlwind rises as he speaks of enormous beasts, Behemoth, and the terrifying Leviathan. After losing almost everything, would you still trust God? Long before there were kings ruling over Israel, in a land called Uz, there lived a man named Job. Job was not just wealthy, he was one of the richest men in the entire region. He owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 oxen and 500 donkeys. He also had a large staff of servants to care for them all. In that world, animals were currency, and Job's herds made him one of the most powerful men anyone knew. But wealth wasn't what made Job stand out. He was known across the land as a man who avoided evil on purpose every single day. He didn't do it because anyone forced him to. He did it because he genuinely feared God and chose to live honestly. Job had 10 children, 7 sons and 3 daughters, and the family was close. The sons took turns hosting feasts at their homes. Job loved his children so much that after each round of feasting, he would quietly get up early. He would offer sacrifices for every one of them. He did this just in case, in all the celebrating, one of them had sinned against God without even realizing it. That was the kind of man Job was. Careful and faithful. He was constantly looking out for the people he loved, even in ways they never saw him do it. Job lived among a group the Bible calls the people of the East. That term was used for wealthy families who lived in tents. They moved their herds across open land instead of settling inside walled cities. Because of that lifestyle, a man's entire fortune could be standing right outside his tent at any given moment. It was grazing, breathing, and vulnerable to weather, disease, or attack. There were no banks and no vaults, no way to lock wealth away and protect it. If something happened to the animals, it happened to everything Job owned all at once. That detail matters because it explains exactly how a man this wealthy could lose almost everything in a single day. But far away from Job's house, something was happening in the unseen world. It was about to put all of that faithfulness to the test. The Bible describes a moment where an accusing spirit stood before God. This spirit is referred to simply as the accuser, and he made a claim about Job. The claim was simple and sharp. Job only worships you because his life is easy. Take away everything he has, the accuser said, and he will curse you to your face. So permission was given to test that claim directly. Job would lose everything in a single day, and he would never be told why. It began as an ordinary afternoon. Nothing about the morning had felt any different from 100 mornings before it. Job's servants had gone out at first light the way they always did. They led the animals to graze and checked on the flocks scattered across the hills. They were settling in for a long, uneventful day of work. Job's oxen were plowing in the field, and his donkeys were grazing beside them when a raiding group called the Sabaeans attacked without warning. They killed the servants guarding the animals and drove off every ox and donkey Job owned. Only one servant escaped, and he ran the whole way back to Job's house, arriving out of breath. He delivered the news as fast as he could. Raiders had struck, the animals were gone, and every other servant with him was dead. The first messenger was still standing there, catching his breath, when a second one came running in from a completely different direction. This one hadn't come from the fields, but from the hills where Job kept his sheep. Fire fell from the sky, he said, and it burned up the sheep and the shepherds. I'm the only one who got away to tell you. Job had just lost his oxen and donkeys to raiders. Now, within minutes, his sheep, thousands of them, were gone too, along with the men who had spent their lives tending them. He didn't even have time to process that before a third messenger burst through the door. This time, it was a group called the Chaldeans. They had split into 3 separate raiding parties and stolen every one of Job's 3,000 camels, killing the servants guarding them in the process. 3 disasters, 3 messengers, all arriving within what felt like minutes of each other. Job had now lost his oxen, his donkeys, his sheep, and his camels, nearly his entire fortune. Dozens of his servants were dead as well. But the worst news of the day hadn't come yet. A 4th messenger arrived, while the 3rd one was still speaking. He was out of breath in a way that seemed different from the others. It wasn't from running as far, but from what he had just seen. It wasn't about animals or stolen property. Job's sons and daughters had been together at the oldest brother's house, feasting the way they always did.
Want your children to learn Bible verses without giving them more screen time?
Instead of endless scrolling, your kids can color, play, and have fun while growing closer to God and learning His Word. Over 70 pages filled with exciting Bible challenges. And if your kids sometimes get bored during church, bring the book along and give them something fun to do. You can check out the book using the link below. Available now on Amazon.
A massive windstorm swept in from the desert. It slammed into the house and collapsed it on top of everyone inside. All 10 of Job's children were dead. Job stood there and absorbed all 4 reports back to back, his animals, his servants, and now his own children. There was no space to breathe in between any of them. 4 messengers, 4 disasters, and not one moment to process any of it before the next one arrived. Then Job did something no one watching would have expected. He stood up and tore his robe as a sign of grief. He shaved his head, which was the customary way people in that culture mourned a devastating loss. Then he lowered himself to the ground, not to collapse in despair, but to worship. "Naked I came from my mother's womb," he said, "and naked I will leave this life. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." In everything that had just happened to him, Job did not sin. He did not blame God for any of it. That should have been the end of the test, but it wasn't. Sometime later, in that same unseen world, the accusing spirit returned with a new argument. He said Job had only held on because his own body was untouched. "A man will give up everything he owns to save his own skin," the accuser said. "Take away his health, and he will curse you to your face." Permission was given a second time. This time, Job's life would be protected, but absolutely nothing else about him would be. Painful sores broke out across Job's entire body, from the bottom of his feet to the top of his head. The pain and itching were so constant that Job left his own house. He went to sit outside in a pile of ashes. That was where people in deep mourning would sit, to show how far they had fallen. He picked up a broken piece of pottery from the ground. He used the jagged edge to scrape at his own skin, just to get a moment of relief from the burning. Neighbors who once came to him for advice now walked past the ash pile without stopping. His opinion had once carried weight across the whole region. They couldn't reconcile the man sitting there with the one they remembered. The richest man in the region was now sitting outside in the dirt, scraping his own body raw in front of anyone who passed by. Days passed like this, and Job's wife stayed near him through all of it. She watched the sores spread, and the pain grow worse with no sign of relief. She had once been married to the wealthiest man in the region. Now she watched him scrape his own skin in a pile of ash outside their home. She had buried 10 children in that same short span of time. Job had lost his entire fortune too, and she had no explanation for any of it. It was there, watching him suffer day after day, that Job's wife finally spoke. She had lost her 10 children too, and she had watched her husband's health collapse in front of her without any sign of it stopping. Her patience had run out completely. "Are you still holding on to your integrity?" she asked him. "Curse God and die." She wasn't a villain in this story. She was a grieving mother who couldn't understand why her husband kept clinging to his faith. It hadn't protected either of them from any of this. But Job refused to give in. "You're talking like a foolish woman talks," he told her. "Should we accept only good from God and never accept hardship?" Job was at his lowest point, sitting in ashes with nothing left. Even so, he would not turn against God. That refusal was exactly what was being tested. Word of Job's suffering eventually reached 3 of his friends, men named Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. Each one came from a different region. When they heard what had happened to Job, they agreed to meet up. They would travel to him together, so none of them would have to face the visit alone. The journey to Job's home took days, and along the way, the 3 men talked quietly among themselves. They tried to understand how a man as faithful as Job could have been struck down this hard. In their culture, it was widely believed that God only allowed this level of suffering as punishment for serious, hidden sin. None of the 3 men could imagine any other explanation. When they finally caught sight of Job from a distance, they almost didn't recognize him. His body was so disfigured by disease that he looked like a completely different man than the one they remembered. The shock hit them immediately, and they began to weep and tore their own robes in grief on his behalf. They threw dust into the air over their heads, mourning as if he had already died. Then they sat down on the ground beside him. For 7 days and 7 nights, not one of them said a single word. His pain was so enormous that at first none of them could find anything worth saying. It was Job who finally broke the silence, not his friends. On the 7th day, he opened his mouth, but instead of praising God the way he had before, he cursed the day he was born. "Let the day I was born be erased," he said. "Let it be forgotten, as if it never happened at all." He wasn't cursing God directly, but he was demanding to know why he had ever been allowed to live through pain this severe. "Why didn't I die the moment I came out of the womb?" he asked. "Why is life even given to a man who is suffering the way I am?" This was the turning point of the story. The patient, worshipping Job from the very beginning, was now a broken man demanding answers. That demand was what set everything that followed into motion. That outburst was exactly what finally broke his friend's silence. Eliphaz spoke first, and his argument was simple. In his own experience, innocent people don't suffer for no reason. So if Job was suffering this badly, it had to mean he had sinned somewhere and needed to repent. Job pushed back hard, insisting he had done nothing to deserve any of it. Bildad spoke next, arguing that God does not twist justice. If Job's own children had died in that storm, it must have been because of something they themselves had done wrong. That accusation cut deeper than the first one had, striking at the memory of the 10 children Job had just buried. Job's replies grew sharper and more desperate in response. Zophar was the harshest of the 3. He told Job flatly that he was actually getting off easier than his sin deserved. Job grew increasingly frustrated, and at one point, he cried out that he wished he could bring his case directly before God. He wanted it judged like a courtroom trial, so someone impartial could decide if he deserved this. By the end of the 3rd round, Zophar had nothing left to say. The arguing simply stopped, unresolved, hanging in the air between 4 exhausted men. What was supposed to be a visit of comfort had turned into an argument. It left Job feeling more alone than before his friends had even arrived. In the middle of all this arguing, a younger man named Elihu finally spoke up. He had been sitting off to the side, listening the entire time without saying a word. He explained that he had stayed quiet out of respect for his elders since he was younger than all 4 men. But he could not hold back any longer because he believed everyone in the conversation had gotten something wrong. His anger, he said, had been building the whole time he sat there in silence. He was angry at the three friends for condemning Job without real proof. He was also angry at Job for defending himself instead of trusting God's judgment. Job's three friends were wrong to assume that suffering always proves hidden sin. But Job was also wrong to spend so much energy demanding that God explain himself, as though God owed him a personal defense. Elihu reminded Job that God is far greater than any human being. He said, suffering doesn't always come as punishment. Sometimes it comes to teach, to refine, or for reasons a person simply isn't able to see. He pointed up at the darkening sky. He told Job that even the weather itself moved by God's command. The thunder, the clouds, and the lightning all moved in ways no human being could predict. It was Elihu's words that finally quieted the argument and set the stage for what happened next. While Elihu was still speaking, the sky above Job began to change. Dark clouds rolled in fast from the horizon, blotting out what little light was left in the day. The wind picked up sharply, pulling at the ashes around Job and stinging his open sores. Thunder started rumbling somewhere in the distance, growing louder with every passing minute. It was a kind of fear they didn't know how to explain. Job, still sitting outside in the ashes of his ruined life, watched the storm build around him without moving. Then, out of the center of that storm, a voice spoke directly to Job. It came not through a messenger, not through a dream, but from inside the whirlwind itself. This was God, answering Job face to face for the first time in the entire story. The voice did not answer Job's question about why he was suffering. Instead, it asked Job a long series of questions of its own. "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth?" the voice asked. "Tell me, if you understand so much." God asked Job whether he had ever once commanded the sunrise. God asked whether he had ever walked across the floor of the ocean or understood where snow and hail are stored before they fall. God asked whether Job had ever climbed the cliffs where wild mountain goats give birth. He asked whether Job had ever watched over the eagle's nest, built high on a rock ledge where no man could reach it. God described the wild donkey that no man can tame and put to work. He described the ostrich, which can outrun a horse, despite having no wisdom of its own to guide it. God asked Job whether he had given the war horse its strength. This was the animal that runs toward battle without fear, laughing at the sound of clashing swords. Then God described two massive, terrifying creatures in detail. There was Behemoth, a beast of overwhelming strength that no man could capture or control. And there was Leviathan, a fearsome creature of the deep, so powerful that no weapon made by human hands could wound it. God's point wasn't to humiliate Job for no reason. It was to show him that the entire natural world runs on a wisdom and power far beyond human understanding. If Job couldn't even explain how the world around him worked, he had no real footing to judge how God was running it. Question after question came out of the whirlwind, and Job had an answer for none of them. He had spent weeks demanding that God explain the reasons behind his suffering. Now God was the one asking the questions. They were about creation, about the animals of the wild, and about the very structure of the world. Job lived inside that world every day without understanding it. Job listened to all of it without interrupting, and when the voice finally paused, Job gave his answer. He didn't argue back, and he didn't demand an explanation anymore. Instead, he said, "I know that you can do all things, and that no plan of yours can ever be stopped. I spoke about things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. I had heard about you before with my own ears, but now my own eyes have seen you. So I take back everything I said, and I repent, sitting here in dust and ashes." Job wasn't repenting over secret sin. He was not the sinner his friends had accused him of being. He was repenting, because he finally understood something important. He had spent weeks demanding answers from someone whose wisdom was too vast for him to question in the first place. God then turned his attention to Job's 3 friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. He told them plainly that he was angry with them because, unlike Job, they had not spoken the truth about him. Their entire argument, that suffering always proves hidden sin, was wrong from the start. God instructed them to offer a sacrifice. He told them that Job himself would pray on their behalf so that they would not be punished for the mistake they had made. The very man his 3 friends had spent chapters accusing was the same man God chose to intercede for them. After Job prayed for his friends, everything about his life began to change. The Bible says the Lord restored Job's fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had owned before any of this happened. His herds came back doubled in size, 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 oxen, and 1,000 donkeys. That was more than he had ever owned in his life. His brothers, sisters, and old friends came back to visit him at his house, comforting him over everything he had suffered. Each visitor arrived with a gift, a piece of silver and a gold ring. These were small tokens that together helped rebuild the fortune raiders, and fire and storms had wiped out in a single afternoon years earlier. The house that had once collapsed under a windstorm was gone. A new one now stood full of noise again, footsteps, laughter, and the sound of a family Job once thought he'd never have again. Job had 10 more children, 7 sons and 3 daughters. His 3 daughters, named Jemima, Keziah, and Karen Hapuch, grew up to become known as the most beautiful women in the entire land. Job gave all 3 of his daughters an inheritance alongside their brothers, which was unusual for that time and place. But Job had learned, through everything he had lost, exactly how much his family was worth to him. Job went on to live another 140 years after all of this. He lived long enough to see 4 generations of his own family grow up around him. He died an old man who had lived a full life. But he carried the memory of the 10 children he lost in that windstorm for the rest of his years. He held his new family close, even as he imagined loving a woman you already know will break your heart. God told Hosea to marry a prostitute. He gave her a home, his name, and his whole heart. Yet she abandoned her family and gave herself to other men. Years later, she lost everything and was sold as a slave. But at the lowest point of her life, when no one else wanted her, God told Hosea to find her, save her, and love her again. What happened next reveals the true love of God, and it will shock you. Many years had passed since Jezebel's altars to Baal were destroyed, but the worship of Baal had not ended. The people of Israel still followed false gods. They worshipped the Lord one day and Baal the next. At the same time, Israel was becoming wealthy again. Trade was growing, and the cities were getting bigger. To many people, the nation seemed safe, but Israel was not safe. Its leaders trusted other nations to protect them instead of trusting God. Israel also had serious problems inside the kingdom. Kings were often killed, and new kings took their place by force. This was the Israel Hosea grew up in. It was rich, divided, unfaithful to God, and close to destruction. Most people did not understand how little time they had left. During these final years, the Lord chose a prophet to speak to the people. His name was Hosea, son of Beeri. He did not come from a wealthy family or a royal family. He was simply a man called to speak for God during the hardest years his nation would ever face. But God did not only ask Hosea to speak a message, he asked him to become one. Go, take to yourself an adulterous wife and children of unfaithfulness, the Lord told him, because the land is guilty of the vilest adultery in departing from the Lord. Hosea 1:2. This was not a parable. It was not a metaphor. It was a direct, personal command. Hosea was to marry a woman who would not stay faithful to him. He was to build a home with someone he already knew would tear it apart. Most men run from a marriage like that. Hosea walked toward it because the God he served asked him to. Her name was Gomer, daughter of Diblaim. Scripture never says Hosea did not love her. It says the opposite. He married her the way any man marries the woman he has chosen. He brought her into his home. He gave her his name. Whatever her past had been, Hosea was ready to build a future with her, one vow at a time. Gomer conceived and bore him a son. For a moment, it must have looked like an ordinary life. A husband, a wife, a newborn boy crying in his father's arms. But God was not finished speaking, and he named the child's name after a city. "Call him Jezreel," the Lord said, "because I will soon punish the house of Jehu for the massacre at Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of Israel." Hosea 1:4. Jezreel was the very valley where Jehu had once ridden his chariot to slaughter Ahab's dynasty. And though he did it in God's name, he had gone on to spill far more blood than he was ever told to. Now that same valley was whispered over Hosea's own son, a walking reminder that the kingdom itself was living on borrowed time. Then Gomer conceived again and gave birth to a daughter. And this time, the name God gave was worse. "Call her Lo-ruhamah," the Lord said, "for I will no longer show love to Israel, that I should at all forgive them." Hosea 1:6. Lo-ruhamah meant not loved. Every single day of that little girl's life, her own name would remind her father of a nation that had run out of second chances. After Lo-ruhamah was named, Gomer had another son. But this time, Scripture changes its wording in a way ancient readers noticed immediately. Of the first child, it said Gomer bore him a son who belonged to Hosea. Of this third child, it simply says Gomer had a son. Nothing more. No mention of Hosea at all. The silence itself was an accusation. Whether the boy was his by blood or not, Hosea was told to raise him anyway, and to name him anyway. "Call him Lo-ami," God said, "for you are not my people, and I am not your God." Hosea 1:9. Lo-ami meant not mine. Hosea had married a woman who might now be carrying another man's child.
Before we continue, these videos takes hours and hours to make. Please like and subscribe and comment which country you are watching this from.
And he was still the one standing in the doorway speaking the name out loud.
Thank you.
By now, the whole town could see what Hosea already knew. Gomer was not staying home. She went chasing after other men, convinced they were the ones providing her food. Eventually, one of them was finished with her too. The clearest reading of what came next is the hardest one. Gomer ended up a slave, sold into another household, valued only for what her body could still be used for. This is where the story stops moving forward for a while, because Hosea's grief did not move forward either. He was left alone in a house built for 2, and then for 5. 3 small children who still had to be fed, still had to be put to bed, still had to be told something when they asked where their mother had gone. There was no good answer to give them. Every name Hosea had ever spoken over those children now sat in the room with him. Jezreel, not loved, not mine. He had named his own home after his own wound, and now he had to live inside it. He was also a prophet, a man Israel was supposed to look to for God's word, and every person in that town knew exactly what his wife had done. He could not grieve quietly. His marriage had already become public the moment God commanded it, and now his heartbreak was public too. Men who had never lost a night's sleep over their own sin whispered about Hosea's wife in the marketplace. Some of them laughed. A prophet who could not even keep his own house in order, they said. Hosea heard every word of it. He kept speaking anyway. There were mornings he still had to stand in the town square and preach regardless, because Israel's sin did not pause for his own. He would open his mouth to call the nation back to faithfulness, while the same crowd that mocked his marriage stood watching, waiting to see whether the man calling them unfaithful could even keep his own wife. And in the evenings, his youngest would tug at his sleeve and ask the same question in a dozen different ways. Where is she? When is she coming back? Hosea never lied to his children. He also never stopped hoping, which made the truth even harder to say out loud. The nights were worse than the marketplace. No verse describes Hosea sitting alone after the children were finally asleep, staring at the side of the bed that no one used anymore. But anyone who has ever loved someone who left knows exactly what that hour feels like. He had not stopped loving her. That was the specific cruelty of it. And through all of it, God said nothing to comfort him. No verse arrives here promising Hosea peace or rest or an easy heart. The silence itself became part of the message. Israel had walked away from a God who loved her the exact same way, and God had let years pass in that same aching silence before he ever acted, so that his prophet's grief could become the closest thing Israel would ever come to feeling what she had actually done to him. Then, finally, God spoke again, and what he said was almost impossible to obey. Go, show your love to your wife again, though she is loved by another man and is an adulteress. Love her as the Lord loves the Israelites, though they turn to other gods. Hosea 3:1. God was not telling Hosea to move on. He was telling him to go back, to find the woman who had left him for other men, who now belonged to someone else entirely, and to love her again, on purpose, with his eyes wide open. Hosea found her exactly where her choices had led her, standing on a slave block, a woman being sold like property to the highest bidder. When he saw her, she did not look like the woman he had married. Years on the street and years as another man's property had taken almost everything from her except her name. He did not have to buy her. No law demanded it. He could have walked past and let another man's mistake stay another man's mistake. Instead, Hosea paid 15 shekels of silver and about a homer and a lethek of barley for her. Hosea 3:2. It was half the price of a slave under the law of Moses, proof of exactly how far Gomer had fallen. Hosea emptied his pockets for a woman who owed him nothing back, said nothing to shame her, and simply led her out by the hand, the way a man leads someone he has already decided to forgive. He brought her home, not to shame her in front of the children, and not to punish her either. You are to live with me many days, he told her. You must not be a prostitute or be intimate with any man, and I will behave the same way toward you. Hosea 3:3. There was no wedding feast this time, no celebration, just a quiet, painful season of rebuilding, one ordinary day at a time, a husband choosing again to love a wife who had given him every reason not to. Years passed inside that quiet house. Hosea kept prophesying, warning Israel that a nation which chased other gods the way Gomer had chased other men would eventually be led away in chains, exactly like she had been. Assyria was already sharpening that exact chain. Within a generation, Samaria would fall, and the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom would be marched into exile, scattered so completely that history still calls them lost. Hosea's marriage was no longer only a warning. It had become a preview. Scripture never explains how the marriage ended. It simply stops following them there and lets the marriage itself finish delivering its message. Because the story was never really about Gomer at all. It was about Israel, a nation that kept running toward other gods, other alliances, other lovers, while the one true God kept buying her back anyway, at a price no one ever forced him to pay. What if I told you one king was so evil and terrifying that he defeated 70 powerful kings, cut off their thumbs and big toes, and forced them to eat scraps under his table? For years, Adoni-Bezek watched the king suffer while he grew more powerful. But then, he faced the Israelites, and this time, he was the one who lost. But what happens next will show you exactly why you should fear God and never be cruel to others. After Joshua died, Israel was left with no leader. The Israelites still had many enemies living in the land. One of the most feared was Adoni-Bezek, the powerful king of Bezek. He had defeated many rulers and had become feared throughout the region. Adoni-Bezek had spent years attacking smaller kingdoms around him. Every victory gave him more soldiers, supplies, land, and power. But taking cities was never enough for him. He wanted every defeated ruler to remember his power for the rest of their lives. Whenever Adoni-Bezek captured a king, he ordered a terrible punishment. His men cut off both thumbs and both large toes. The wounds did not kill the ruler, but they made him helpless. He could no longer hold a sword properly or walk without great difficulty. After the punishment, Adoni-Bezek kept each injured king in his court. They were not allowed to sit with the important men during royal meals. Instead, they stayed near the floor and picked up pieces of food that fell from Adoni-Bezek's table. Anyone who saw them could understand the warning. The punishment was not only meant to stop these kings from fighting again. Adoni-Bezek also used them to show everyone how powerful he was. These men had once ruled kingdoms, commanded armies, and made decisions for their own people. Now they could barely walk or use their hands, and they depended on Adoni-Bezek even for food. As the years passed, more defeated kings were brought into Adoni-Bezek's court. Each one had suffered the same terrible punishment. In time, 70 kings were living under his control. Their broken bodies showed how many kingdoms he had defeated. News of his cruelty spread throughout the region. Some nearby rulers gave him supplies before he even asked. Others offered soldiers because they feared what he might do to them. None of them wanted to become another helpless king beneath his table. These victories convinced Adoni-Bezek that no army could defeat him. Many kings had fought him with soldiers, weapons, and strong walls. Each one had fallen into his hands. Whenever a new threat appeared, he remembered the captives beneath his table. Their suffering made him feel safe, and he believed fear would protect him again. Then, troubling news reached Bezek. The tribes of Israel were preparing to fight again. After Joshua died, they had asked God which tribe should attack first. God chose Judah to lead the next campaign. The tribe of Judah then asked Simeon to fight beside them. Simeon agreed, and the two tribes joined their soldiers together to defeat Bezek. Their combined army entered the land around Bezek. They were coming toward the city and its powerful king. Messengers carried reports of their movements to Bezek. Each new report showed that the soldiers were getting closer. Adoni-Bezek knew he would soon have to face them. Still, he did not believe that they could defeat him. He had fought many armies during his years as king. He had captured their rulers and taken control of their lands. His own soldiers also knew the area around Bezek very well. He believed these advantages would give him another easy victory. Adoni-Bezek began preparing before the enemy reached his city. He sent orders to his commanders and called his soldiers together. Men repaired damaged shields and sharpened their swords. Others carried food and water to the fields outside the walls. Bezek also called for fighters from nearby towns. Canaanite and Perizzite soldiers came to help him. Some relied on Bezek for protection. Others joined because they were afraid that Israel would attack their homes next. Soon, a large army gathered outside the city. Commanders moved groups of soldiers into position and prepared them for battle. Guards watched the roads and waited for Judah's army to appear. Everyone in the city knew that a major battle was coming. Adoni-Bezek walked among his soldiers and checked their weapons. Everywhere he looked, he saw men ready to fight for him. Seeing such a large army made him even more confident. He was already thinking about what would happen after he won. He believed the Israelites would become afraid when they saw his army. He expected them to lose the battle and run away. He even imagined their leaders becoming prisoners like the other kings in his court. To him, This battle was another chance to show his power. But Judah and Simeon were not afraid. Their soldiers kept moving forward until they reached the land near Bezek. There, they saw the large army waiting for them outside the city. Even after seeing how many enemies were there, they did not turn back. They prepared to fight. The two armies finally met outside Bezek. Judah's soldiers attacked with great force, while Simeon's soldiers fought beside them. Adoni-Bezek's men fought back and tried to stop the Israelites from moving forward. At first, Adoni-Bezek's commanders sent more soldiers to the places where the fighting was strongest. They tried to stop Judah every time they moved forward, but Judah continued attacking, and soon one part of Adoni-Bezek's army began to break apart. Some of his soldiers started moving backward, while others became separated from their commanders. The army slowly broke into smaller groups. With so much fighting and noise around them, the soldiers could no longer hear their commanders clearly. Some men began running toward the city, while others tried to escape from the battlefield. Adoni-Bezek watched as his army began to fall apart. His soldiers were no longer fighting together, and they could not stop Judah's attack. The battle Adoni-Bezek expected to win became a terrible defeat. 10,000 Canaanite and Perizzite men fell near Bezek that day. The large army that had gathered to protect the city was defeated, and the soldiers who remained began running away. There was now almost nothing standing between Adoni-Bezek and Judah's soldiers. His commanders could no longer protect him or stop the Israelites from reaching him. Adoni-Bezek finally understood that he could be captured. Now he began to feel the same fear that the kings he had defeated had once felt. Adoni-Bezek saw that his army was losing the battle, but then he did something nobody would ever expect a king to do.
Want your children to learn Bible verses without giving them more screen time?
Instead of endless scrolling, your kids can color, play, and have fun while growing closer to God and learning His Word. Over 70 pages filled with exciting Bible challenges. And if your kids sometimes get bored during church, bring the book along and give them something fun to do. You can check out the book using the link below. Available now on Amazon.
Instead of staying to fight, he turned around and ran away. The king, who had once chased and captured many rulers, was now running for his own life. He left his soldiers, commanders, and city behind. The fighting around him gave Adoni-Bezek a short chance to escape. He made his way past his defeated soldiers and ran across the open land. With every step he moved farther away from his city and palace. Before this day, Adoni-Bezek had decided what happened to the kings he captured. But now, he was the one in danger of being captured. Some soldiers from Judah saw Adoni-Bezek running away. They knew they needed to catch him before he escaped. So they left the main battle and began chasing him across the land. Soon, Adoni-Bezek could hear the soldiers coming behind him. Adoni-Bezek kept running as fast as he could. He knew that if he slowed down, Judah's soldiers would catch him. This time, he had no guards beside him and no soldiers ahead of him to protect him. He searched for somewhere to hide, but there was nowhere safe for him to go. None of his soldiers were nearby to help him. Adoni-Bezek became more tired as he ran, while Judah's soldiers continued getting closer. The soldiers refused to stop chasing him. Little by little, they got closer to Adoni-Bezek. Finally, they reached him, and his escape was over. Adoni-Bezek could not fight several armed soldiers alone. Judah's soldiers surrounded him and took him prisoner. The powerful king, who had captured so many other kings, had now been captured himself. Adoni-Bezek was completely under their control. His army could no longer save him. No other ruler came to help him. The power he once had was gone after losing the battle. The man who had defeated 70 kings was now helpless before the Israelites. Then Judah's soldiers gave Adoni-Bezek the same punishment he had given the other kings. They cut off both of his thumbs and both of his big toes. The wounds did not kill him, but from that moment, his life would never be the same. Adoni-Bezek now suffered in the same way as the rulers he had punished. He had made those kings unable to properly use their hands or walk. Now the same thing had happened to him, and escaping from his enemies became almost impossible. Adoni-Bezek understood why the soldiers had given him this punishment. No one needed to explain it to him. He looked at his injured hands and immediately remembered the kings he had punished in the same way. He remembered seeing those kings picking up pieces of food from under his table. Without their thumbs, even picking up food was difficult. He remembered watching them struggle to stand and walk because their big toes were gone. Their suffering had once made him feel powerful. But now, Adoni-Bezek had the same injuries. He finally understood what those kings had suffered because of him. The punishment he had used against others had now been used against him. What once showed his power now showed his defeat. As Judah's soldiers stood around him, Adoni-Bezek began to speak. He did not say that he was innocent. He did not ask why this punishment had happened to him. Instead, he thought about all the kings he had treated this way. 70 kings with their thumbs and big toes cut off gathered scraps under my table, he said. As I have done, so God has repaid me. Judah's soldiers did not let Adoni-Bezek go after hearing his words. They kept him as a prisoner and prepared to continue their journey. Adoni-Bezek was taken away from his own land as an injured prisoner. He would never rule Bezek as king again. Traveling was now very difficult for him because of his injured feet. Walking across rough ground became painful, and keeping his balance was difficult. Judah's army took Adoni-Bezek with them toward Jerusalem. Their fighting was not finished after defeating his army near Bezek. The Israelites continued moving forward toward their next enemy. News of Adoni-Bezek's defeat soon spread across the land. People heard that his army had lost the battle and that he had tried to run away. They also heard that Judah's soldiers had captured and punished him. The powerful king that many people once feared had finally been defeated. After this, Judah's army continued toward Jerusalem and attacked the city. Judah's soldiers defeated the men who were defending it. They attacked the city and set parts of it on fire. Another enemy city had now fallen before Judah. Adoni-Bezek was brought into Jerusalem as a prisoner. He no longer had soldiers around him or guards protecting him. He could not fight or easily escape because of his injuries. Almost everything that had once given him power was now gone. After causing so much suffering to other kings, he now understood what that suffering felt like. Adoni-Bezek remained in Jerusalem after Judah brought him there. His injuries meant that he would never return to battle or rule Bezek again. The king who had once captured and punished 70 other kings had now been defeated himself. Not long after being brought to Jerusalem, Adoni-Bezek died there. One wrong move,
I will murder you!
and the king would die. King Eglon tortured Israel and had people living in misery for 18 years. He forced everyone to give him their food and money. Then one man had enough and stood up. But what happens next will show you one of the most disturbing endings ever recorded in Scripture. Israel was trapped in a terrible cycle. The people stopped following God and started worshipping the false gods of the nation. Because Israel turned away from God, God allowed an enemy nation to become powerful and defeat them. Israel would suffer under that enemy for years. Eventually, the suffering became so bad that the Israelites cried out to God and begged him to save them. This time, their enemy was Moab, a kingdom located east of the Jordan River. The king of Moab was a man named Eglon. Eglon was no normal king. He became one of the harshest rulers Israel had ever been forced to live under. Moab and Israel had fought each other before, but those fights were usually small. Soldiers might cross the border, attack an area, and then return home. Eglon wanted something much bigger. He did not simply want to attack Israel once and leave. He wanted to control part of Israel for years and force the Israelites to keep giving him money and goods. But Eglon knew he did not have enough soldiers to do this alone. So he sent messengers to two nearby nations, the Ammonites and the Amalekites, asking them to help. Both nations wanted something from Israel too, so all three nations agreed to work together. They chose the land they would attack, the path their armies would take across the river, and the exact time their attack would begin. Together, the three armies crossed into Israelite territory and struck a city called the City of Palms, a name used for Jericho because of the palm trees growing around it. The defenders there had never faced three armies at once. Moabite soldiers pressed the gates, while Ammonite and Amalekite fighters cut off the roads leading out. And within days, the city's walls held for only a short time before giving way. The city fell quickly. From that point on, Moab held real power over the Israelite tribes nearby, and Israel had no army strong enough to push them back out. For 18 years after that, Israel served Eglon. Every year, Israelite leaders gathered grain and silver and sent it to Eglon as tribute, a forced payment that kept the peace only because Israel had no way to refuse it. Families set aside part of every harvest for this purpose. Moab's control reached further than the payments alone. Moabite officials traveled through Israelite towns to make sure everything was prepared correctly, arriving unannounced and expecting full cooperation. In some towns, small groups of Moabite soldiers stayed year-round, a constant reminder of who held power now. Eglon ruled from a palace built for comfort. He was also a notably large man, heavier than most kings of his time, a fact everyone at court noticed, but no one dared mention out loud. That detail seemed unimportant until it wasn't. Israelite leaders who came before Eglon learned quickly what kind of king he was. He listened to their requests without much patience, and complaints about the yearly demands were rarely welcomed. Those who pushed too hard were sent home with a warning instead of an answer, and word of that warning spread fast to every other town nearby. Most leaders learned not to push at all. Eventually, the suffering became too much. The Israelites cried out to God for help. It wasn't a quiet, private prayer. It was the same kind of desperate plea their people had made before, whenever they had run out of every other option. God responded by raising up a deliverer, a man named Ehud from the tribe of Benjamin. Ehud wasn't a famous soldier, and nobody in Moab had any reason to be watching him closely. He lived the same kind of ordinary life as the men around him, working the land and answering to his own local leaders. But he had one unusual trait. He was left-handed, at a time when almost every soldier trained and fought with the right hand. That single detail would decide everything that happened next. The tribe of Benjamin was known for producing skilled fighters, even soldiers who could sling stones with either hand and never miss. Ehud grew up among men like that, in a small territory wedged between larger, more powerful tribes. Nothing in his early life marked him out as the one who would end Moab's grip on Israel. He was simply a man from a small tribe, chosen for an ordinary task that year. Before he left, Ehud made himself a short sword, sharpened on both sides, and strapped it high on his right thigh, hidden under his clothing.
Want your children to learn Bible verses without giving them more screen time?
Instead of endless scrolling, your kids can color, play, and have fun while growing closer to God and learning His Word. Over 70 pages filled with exciting Bible challenges. And if your kids sometimes get bored during church, bring the book along and give them something fun to do. You can check out the book using the link below. Available now on Amazon.
God searching a visitor always checked the left side, since that's where a right-handed man would carry a blade. Nobody expected a weapon on a left-handed man's right leg, and nobody found one. The journey to Eglon's palace took several days on foot, following the same route Israel's payments had traveled every year before. Ehud walked with the other men, saying little, carrying the plan alone in his own mind. None of them knew what he intended to do once they reached the palace. Along the way, they passed through small settlements, where local farmers watched the caravan go by. They crossed into Moabite territory at a well-known point along the border, where a small garrison usually waved these caravans through without much delay. This year was no different. The guards recognized the goods, recognized the purpose of the trip, and let the group pass without a second look. At the palace, they were brought before Eglon to present the gifts. Officials and scribes stood along the walls, ready to record everything that was handed over. Guards stood near the entrance, watching each man file past them one at a time. Eglon sat where he could watch it all, laid out in front of him. Baskets of grain were set down first, followed by measures of silver counted out one by one. The ceremony went the way it always had, with nothing to suggest this visit was any different. Once it was finished, Ehud left with the rest of the group. He walked out past a set of stone idols near the edge of the town, letting the distance between them and the palace grow. Then he stopped. He told the men to go on ahead without him, and turned back, alone. He had one chance to get close to Eglon, without a room full of guards watching. He couldn't explain his plan to anyone, not even the men he trusted, because one nervous face could have ruined everything. Walking back through the same gate he had just passed through, Ehud kept his pace even and his eyes forward, giving the guards no reason to look at him twice. He had nothing to rely on except the sword hidden against his own leg. He returned to the palace and told the guards he had a private matter to discuss. Eglon ordered the room cleared. Every attendant nearby was sent out until it was just the two of them, alone in Eglon's cool upper room, with the doors shut. Eglon had no reason to fear one unarmed man from a nation that had never fought back. Ehud stepped closer. "I have a message from God for you," he said. At those words, Eglon rose from his seat. The kind of respectful gesture a king would make for a message from a god. That single movement was the opening Ehud needed. He reached across with his left hand, drew the hidden sword, and drove it into the king's stomach. Eglon's size worked against him. The blade went in so deep that even the handle disappeared, and there was no strength left in him to stop it. Ehud didn't pull the sword back out. He left it there, stepped back, and walked out, shutting the doors behind him and slipping away through a side porch, unnoticed. The palace carried on as though nothing had happened. Guards stood at their posts along the outer halls, unaware that the king they served was already dead a few rooms away. Servants moved through the courtyard preparing the evening meal, calling out orders to each other the way they always did at that hour. Somewhere below, an official who had watched the ceremony that morning was already writing up the day's count, with no idea the king he served would never read it. Eglon's attendants came back later and found the doors locked. This wasn't unusual, since the king often wanted privacy in that room, so they assumed he simply didn't want to be disturbed. Minutes passed. The attendants began whispering to one another, wondering whether something was wrong, but no one wanted to be the one to suggest opening the king's door. One of them paced near the entrance, listening for any sound from inside, but the room stayed completely silent. Finally, someone found a key. They opened the doors and stepped inside. Their king was already dead on the floor. Word of what had happened moved through the palace fast. The guards who had let Ehud walk out unquestioned now realized they had let the king's killer go free. Some blamed each other for not searching him more carefully. Riders were finally sent out along the main road toward Israel, the route any ordinary traveler would take. But Ehud had already left that road behind and cut through open country instead. By the time anyone thought to search elsewhere, he already had too great a head start to catch. By then, he was far away, moving through the hill country of Ephraim. He blew a trumpet, the signal Israel used to call men to battle. They left their fields and their homes and gathered behind him, faster than Moab could have expected from a people who had spent 18 years paying for peace instead of raising an army. Word of Eglon's death reached the Moabite ranks too, and without their king, their command fell into confusion right when they needed it most, with no one left to give the orders that mattered. Ehud led the army down to the fords of the Jordan River, the shallow points Moabite soldiers would need to cross to reach home. By seizing those crossings first, he cut off any escape before the fighting even began. Moab's soldiers, many still unaware of what had happened to their king, found themselves trapped between the river and an army finally ready to fight back. The fighting spread along the riverbank through the day. Israelite soldiers held the crossings while others pressed in from the higher ground behind them. Others tried to swim across at points away from the fords, but the current worked against them. Officers who had marched confidently into Israelite territory only weeks earlier now found themselves cut off from every road home, with no reinforcements coming from behind. None of them made it across. Scripture records 10,000 Moabite soldiers dying that day, strong and capable fighting men, and not one of them escaped. The kingdom that had conquered Jericho and collected payment from Israel for nearly 2 decades was broken in a single afternoon. After that, Moab was placed under Israel's control, and the land had peace for 80 years, longer than almost any other period in the whole era of the Judges. Ehud continued to lead Israel for the rest of his life, settling disputes and guiding the tribes the way judges. What would you do if your father was dying? Nations were coming to kill you, and even your own people turned away from you. Jotham became king over Judah and had to protect his whole nation. If he failed, Judah would be destroyed, surrounded by enemies. While his own people turned farther from God, he faced a battle that seemed impossible to survive. How could one forgotten king keep an entire kingdom alive? To understand that, we must go back to the beginning. Long before Jotham became king, he was already leading Judah. His father, Uzziah, was still the king, but he could no longer rule the nation. So the people turned to Jotham. Day after day, he sat where kings sat and made the decisions that kept the kingdom running. People came from all over Judah, bringing their biggest problems. Neighbors argued over land, families fought over money, others claimed something had been stolen from them. Jotham listened carefully to both sides before deciding who was telling the truth. Then he gave his judgment, and everyone had to obey. While Uzziah lived away from the people, Jotham quietly carried the weight of the kingdom. Only a few years earlier, Uzziah had been one of Judah's strongest kings. He had commanded a powerful army, won wars, and built walls and towers across the land. His name had become famous, and Judah's enemies feared him. But the more powerful he became, the more pride grew inside him. One day, Uzziah entered the temple in Jerusalem, carrying a container used for burning incense. Incense was a special material that made a sweet smell when it burned. Only the priests were allowed to burn it before God. Azariah, the chief priest, saw what Uzziah was doing. He followed the king into the temple with 80 brave priests. They stood against Uzziah and warned him clearly. "You have no right to burn incense to the Lord," they told him. "This work belongs to the priests, the sons of Aaron. Leave the temple now." Uzziah did not listen. Instead, he became furious. He stood inside the temple with the incense container still in his hand, angry that the priests had dared to stop him. Then, without warning, a terrible disease appeared on his forehead. The priests saw it at once. The mark was there, clear on the king's skin. They rushed him out of the temple, and Uzziah hurried to leave. He knew that God had struck him. From that day until his death, Uzziah lived in a separate house. He could never enter the temple again. He was still king, but he could no longer stand before the people or lead the nation as he once had. That left Judah without a public leader. So Jotham took his father's place. Every day, people still came with problems that needed answers. Orders still had to be given, and the law still had to be followed. Uzziah was alive, but Jotham now carried the work of ruling Judah. The problems of the kingdom did not stop because Uzziah was gone from public life. Families still argued, crimes still had to be judged, and leaders still needed someone to guide them. Each case placed another hard choice before Jotham. With every decision, he was already learning the work of a king. Jotham lived beside a frightening warning. His father had followed God and become strong, but pride had destroyed everything at the end. Uzziah still had his title, his wealth, and his royal blood, yet he spent his final years alone. His power could not save him from the result of his sin. For years, Jotham led Judah while his father remained in the separate house. Then Uzziah died, and Jotham became king after him. Jotham was 25 years old when his rule began, and he ruled in Jerusalem for 16 years. His mother was Jerusha, the daughter of Zadok. Jotham did not step into a job he had never seen before. He had already listened to the people, judged their problems, and carried the daily needs of the kingdom. But now the crown belonged to him. His father was gone, and every part of Judah was fully under Jotham's rule. Jotham did what was right before God. The crown gave Jotham great power, yet it did not give him the right to do anything he wanted. But there was a deep problem inside Judah. Jotham followed God, while many of his people continued to do wrong. They still worshipped at the high places, which were worship sites outside the temple. People brought offerings and burned incense there, instead of worshipping as God had commanded. Jotham could make good choices as king, but he could not make those choices for every person. The people had to decide whether they would follow God.
Before we continue, these videos takes hours and hours to make. Please like and subscribe, and comment which country you are watching this from.
Many of them chose the wrong path, so Judah remained strong on the outside, while something dangerous grew inside. Jotham kept working. He began by rebuilding the upper gate near the temple. This was an important gate in the temple area, and Jotham made it stronger. His father had entered the temple because of pride, but Jotham used his power to care for the place around it. He also worked on the wall of Ophel, a part of Jerusalem close to the temple. A weak wall could give an enemy a way into the city, so Jotham added more work there. Stone by stone, the wall became stronger. Jotham then looked beyond Jerusalem. He built towns in the hill country of Judah, where people needed safe places to live. He also built forts and towers in the wooded areas. Soldiers could use these places to protect the land and watch for danger. His work spread across the kingdom. The temple area had a stronger gate. Jerusalem had a stronger wall. The hill country gained towns, while the wooded lands gained forts and towers. Jotham was not hiding inside his palace. He was making Judah ready for whatever might come. For a time, the building continued and Judah grew stronger. Workers raised walls, soldiers watched from towers, and families lived behind the new defenses. Then the years of building faced their first great test. An enemy was moving toward Judah, and Jotham could no longer protect the land with stone alone. Then war came from the east. Across the Jordan River lived the Ammonites, an old enemy of Israel. Their king went to war against Jotham, and the peace of Judah was broken. The nation Jotham had spent years strengthening now had to face a real enemy. Jotham led Judah into war and defeated the king of Ammon. The Ammonites could not stand against him, and their defeat was so great that they had to pay Judah for 3 years. Each year, they gave Jotham 100 talents of silver. That was about 3,400 kilograms, a huge weight of silver. They also gave him 10,000 kor of wheat and 10,000 kor of barley. A kor was an old measure used for grain, and these numbers meant an enormous amount of food. The payment came again the next year, and then again in the third year. Silver, wheat, and barley continued to enter Judah because the Ammonites had lost the war. By now, Jotham had become a powerful ruler. For many years, Judah remained firm under Jotham. The walls stood strong, the forts watched over the land, and the towns were protected. The Ammonites had been defeated, and their payments had brought great wealth into the kingdom. But another danger was already rising in the north. Two kings had begun to turn against Judah. One was Rezin, the king of Syria. The other was Pekah, the king of Israel. At that time, Israel and Judah were two separate kingdoms. Judah was in the south, with Jerusalem as its main city. Israel was in the north, and Pekah ruled there. Pekah joined Rezin of Syria, and together they became a serious threat. Jotham had already defeated an enemy in the east, but now danger was gathering in the north. This time, two kings were joining their strength against Judah. One victory had not made the kingdom safe forever, and the new threat was moving closer. No one knew when it would strike. Their attack began to form during Jotham's reign, like a dark storm growing beyond Judah's borders. The full danger would come later, during the rule of Jotham's son Ahaz. But before Jotham died, the first signs of trouble had already appeared. Jotham had built walls, forts, and towers, but those things could protect Judah only from enemies outside the nation. They could not remove the evil inside the hearts of the people. Stone could stop a soldier, but it could not make a person obey God. But there was one danger Jotham could not remove. Across Judah, many people still went to the high places to worship. They offered sacrifices there instead of worshiping God the way he had commanded. Jotham remained faithful, but he could not change every heart in the nation. From the outside, Judah looked stronger than ever. The cities were protected by walls. The army was ready for war. The fields produced food, and the people lived in peace. But beneath that peaceful picture, something was slowly changing. More and more people turned away from God without realizing where that path would lead. The years continued to pass. Seasons came and went, and Jotham faithfully ruled over Judah. He listened to the people, settled their disputes, protected the kingdom, and made sure the nation remained strong. No great rebellion rose against him. No enemy marched in and destroyed the land. Judah remained peaceful under his rule. At last, after ruling Judah for 16 years, Jotham's life came to an end. The people buried him in the city of David, where the kings of Judah were laid to rest. Mourners filled the streets as the nation said goodbye to a king who had ruled with wisdom and remained faithful to God. Then his son, Ahaz, placed the crown upon his own head and became the new king of Judah. No one knew it yet, but the peace Jotham had protected for so many years was about to come to an end. The choices of Judah's new king would lead the nation into one of its darkest chapters. The next king would not simply make a few bad decisions. He would lead an entire nation away from God, trust Israel's greatest enemy instead of the Lord, and commit one of the most horrifying acts ever recorded about a king of Judah. If you want to see the terrifying story of Ahaz, tell me in the comments. What if God told you your king would die, but nobody believed you? Micaiah received a vision from God. He was given a terrifying warning for the king and the entire nation. But when Micaiah warned the king became furious and threw him into prison. Why would a king imprison a prophet for telling the truth? To find out, we must go back to the beginning. Micaiah, son of Imlah, was the one prophet King Ahab did not want to hear. Hundreds of other prophets were ready to stand before the king and promise him success.
The kingdom flourishes under your just rule.
Micaiah was different. He would not shape his message to please the throne. Whenever the word of the Lord warned of danger,
The Lord has decreed it. You must heed this warning.
he spoke the warning exactly as it came. Because of that, Ahab hated him. For 3 years, there had been no war between Israel and Syria. Yet the peace had left one matter unsettled. Ramoth-Gilead remained under Syrian control, even though the city belonged to Israel. Ahab wanted to take it back, but he needed another army to stand beside his own. In the 3rd year of peace, Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, came to Samaria to visit Ahab. The 2 kings spoke about Ramoth-Gilead, and Ahab asked Jehoshaphat to join him in battle. Jehoshaphat agreed, but he would not send his soldiers forward until they first asked the Lord what they should do. Ahab gathered about 400 prophets. They appeared before the kings and gave one united answer. Ahab should march against Ramoth-Gilead. The battle would end in victory, and the city would fall into his hands. The answer pleased Ahab, but Jehoshaphat was not convinced. 400 voices had spoken, yet he still asked whether there was another prophet of the Lord in Israel. Only then did Ahab mention Micaiah. He admitted that Micaiah could ask the Lord for them, but he also admitted that he hated him. In Ahab's eyes,
He prophesies nothing but evil.
Let not the king say so. We must hear the word of the Lord.
Jehoshaphat refused to accept hatred as a reason to silence a prophet, so an officer was ordered to bring Micaiah at once. While the officer hurried away, the 2 kings prepared to receive the final answer. Wearing their royal robes, they sat upon their thrones in the open space beside the gate of Samaria. Before the thrones stood the 400 prophets, still promising that Ahab would win. One of them, Zedekiah, son of Chenaanah, had made 2 horns from iron. He raised them before the kings and pushed them through the air like weapons. The iron horns were meant to show what Ahab would do to Syria. According to Zedekiah, Israel would drive into the Syrian army and destroy it completely. The other prophets repeated the same promise. Their voices spread through the gate until hundreds of men sounded like one. Every word pushed Ahab toward the battle. Every voice told him that victory was waiting at Ramoth-Gilead. Micaiah was the only known prophet missing from the gathering. Ahab had called the men whose answer he expected, while leaving out the man whose answer he feared. If Jehoshaphat had not asked for another prophet, the armies might have marched without Micaiah ever being brought before the kings. But now an officer was moving through Samaria to find him, and the voice Ahab had tried to avoid was being summoned to the gate. Away from the city gate, the officer found Micaiah and began bringing him toward the kings. As they walked, he warned Micaiah about the gathering ahead. All the prophets had agreed. All of them had promised success. The officer urged Micaiah to protect himself by giving Ahab the same answer. Micaiah continued toward the city. "As surely as the Lord lives," he said, "I will speak only what the Lord tells me." The officer's warning did not slow him. 2 kings and 400 prophets waited ahead, but Micaiah kept walking toward them. Their number could not change the message he had been given. The noise from the prophets grew louder as Micaiah approached Samaria. When he entered the gate, people moved aside and watched him pass. Ahead of him were 2 kings wearing royal robes. Around them stood hundreds of prophets. Ahab asked him whether Israel should attack Ramoth-Gilead or remain at home. At first, Micaiah gave the king the answer he wanted. He told Ahab to go and succeed because the city would be delivered into his hand. But the words did not sound like a true promise. Ahab recognized that Micaiah was not speaking plainly. He demanded the truth in the name of the Lord. Then Micaiah's answer changed. "I saw all Israel scattered across the hills like sheep without a shepherd," he said. "And the Lord said, 'These people have no master. Let each man return to his home in peace.'" The message fell heavily over the gate. Micaiah had not described an army celebrating around its victorious king. He had seen soldiers scattered across the hills. They would return to their homes. but the man who led them into battle would not return with them. Ahab immediately turned to Jehoshaphat. Micaiah's warning, he said, proved why he hated him. Once again, the prophet had spoken of disaster instead of success. But Micaiah had not finished. Standing alone before the kings, he began to describe the vision the Lord had shown him. He had seen far beyond the gate of Samaria and far above the thrones of men. He had seen the Lord seated upon his throne.
Want your children to learn Bible verses without giving them more screen time?
Instead of endless scrolling, your kids can color, play, and have fun while growing closer to God and learning His Word. Over 70 pages filled with exciting Bible challenges. And if your kids sometimes get bored during church, bring the book along and give them something fun to do. You can check out the book using the link below. Available now on Amazon.
With the entire host of heaven standing around him, on his right and on his left. In the vision, Micaiah was no longer surrounded by the crowded streets of Samaria. Before him was the throne of the Lord. The heavenly host filled the space around it, standing in their places and waiting. The earthly court had been loud with men repeating one another, but the heavenly court waited upon the voice of God. No royal robes could impress anyone there. No iron horns could control what happened there. The heavenly host stood before the throne as the Lord spoke about Ahab and the battle he wanted to fight. The Lord asked who would persuade Ahab to march against Ramoth-Gilead and fall there. Different answers were given. Then one spirit stepped forward and offered to persuade him by becoming a lying spirit in the mouths of his prophets. The spirit would fill their mouths with promises of victory and lead Ahab toward the place where he would die. The Lord said that the plan would succeed. The vision explained everything happening at the city gate. The 400 prophets were not proof that Ahab would win. Their complete agreement was the trap drawing him toward battle. Their confidence did not change the warning. Their number did not change the truth. Micaiah looked toward the men surrounding him and told Ahab that a lying spirit was speaking through his prophets. Then Zedekiah moved. He stepped away from the other prophets, crossed the open space, and struck Micaiah across the cheek. In front of both kings and the watching crowd, Zedekiah demanded to know how the Spirit of the Lord could have left him to speak through Micaiah. Micaiah did not strike him back. He answered that a day would come when Zedekiah would run into a hidden room and try to hide. On that day, after the promised victory had become disaster, Zedekiah would know which prophet had spoken the truth. Ahab refused to hear any more. Instead of changing his plans, he ordered his guards to seize Micaiah. They were to take him to Ammon, the governor of the city, and Joash, the king's son. Micaiah would be locked in prison and kept alive with only a little bread and water. Ahab intended to deal with him after returning safely from Ramoth-Gilead. The guards took hold of Micaiah and pulled him away from the thrones. Before they could remove him from the gate, Micaiah turned back toward Ahab. "If you return safely," he called out, "then the Lord has not spoken through me." He raised his voice again and called on the whole gathering to listen. The warning had now been spoken before both kings, all the prophets, and everyone watching at the gate. Then the guards carried him away. Micaiah was placed under guard and given the small amount of bread and water ordered by the king. Outside the prison, Ahab chose the promise of 400 prophets over the warning of one. Israel and Judah prepared for war. The gate that had been filled with prophecy was soon filled with the movement of soldiers. Weapons were gathered, horses were prepared, and chariots were brought into position. The armies marched north toward Ramoth-Gilead. Rows of soldiers crossed the land behind horses and chariots. Micaiah could not see them leave from behind the prison walls, but every step carried Ahab closer to the hills the prophet had seen. Before the battle, Ahab decided to hide his identity. He entered the field dressed like an ordinary soldier, while Jehoshaphat continued wearing his royal robes. Ahab could hide his crown, his clothing, and every mark of his position. But his disguise could not erase the word Micaiah had spoken. The king of Syria had ordered his 32 chariot commanders to search for Ahab and fight no one else. When the battle began, the commanders looked across the field and saw Jehoshaphat's royal clothing. Believing he was Ahab, they drove directly toward him. The Syrian chariots closed around Jehoshaphat. He cried out, and the Lord helped him. The commanders looked again and realized that they were chasing the wrong king. They turned away, leaving Jehoshaphat alive. Elsewhere on the field, Ahab remained hidden among the ordinary soldiers. The Syrian commanders had not found him. No enemy warrior appeared to know where he was. Then a Syrian soldier raised his bow. He did not aim at a king. He simply pulled back the string and released an arrow toward the army of Israel. The arrow flew across the battlefield and struck Ahab in the narrow opening between two pieces of his armor. His disguise had hidden his identity, but it had not protected him. The arrow entered his body, and blood began flowing from the wound. Ahab ordered his chariot driver to turn and carry him out of the battle. But the fighting grew stronger, and the king remained on the field. He was held upright in his chariot while his blood ran down and gathered beneath him. Hour after hour, the battle continued. Ahab's strength slowly left him. As the sun went down over Ramoth-Gilead, the king died in his chariot. At sunset, a cry spread through the Israelite army, telling every soldier to return to his own city and his own land. The men left the battlefield and scattered across the hills. Their king was dead. They were exactly what Micaiah had seen, sheep without a shepherd, returning home without their master. Ahab's body was carried back to Samaria and buried. His bloody chariot was washed beside a pool in the city. As the blood flowed out with the water, dogs came and licked it, according to the word the Lord had spoken. The king had ordered Micaiah to remain on bread and water until he returned safely. But the prison door would never open for Ahab's return. The king who hated Micaiah was dead. The army had scattered. The iron horns had proved empty, and the voices of 400 prophets had failed. Micaiah had stood alone at the gate of Samaria, but he had not changed his message. He had spoken of a shepherd who would not return, and now Israel had returned without its king. Everything Micaiah had seen before the throne of heaven had happened. What if I told you? One man tried to protect the holiest object in the world, and God struck him dead for it. King David brought the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, but on the way there, something horrible happened. One of the oxen stumbled, and out of kindness, Uzzah reached out to stop the ark from falling. The moment he touched it, he died. Why would God kill a man for trying to protect his holy ark? To understand this, we must go back. King David and 30,000 chosen men celebrated with songs, harps, trumpets, and cymbals as they traveled toward Jerusalem. At the front, Ahio guided the oxen pulling a new wooden cart. His brother Uzzah walked beside it, close to the holiest object in Israel. Resting on the cart was the Ark of the Covenant. God had commanded Moses to build it many years earlier. It represented God's holy presence among Israel, and strict rules controlled how it could be moved. No person was permitted to touch it. For many years, the ark had remained inside the house of Uzzah's father, Abinadab. His brother Eleazar had been chosen to guard it. Now, David wanted to bring it into Jerusalem, the new center of his kingdom. David wanted to honor God, but he was moving it in a way God had forbidden. God had commanded chosen Levites to carry the ark on their shoulders using long poles. Instead, the Israelites placed it on a cart pulled by oxen. Uzzah continued walking beside it as the enormous celebration moved toward Jerusalem. The ark was a wooden chest covered with gold. The stone tablets of the covenant were placed inside it, and 2 golden angels stretched their wings across its cover. 4 golden rings were fixed to the sides of the ark. When Israel moved the ark, priests were supposed to cover it first. Then chosen Levites could lift it by the poles and carry it without touching the sacred chest. God's warning was clear. The carriers could not touch the holy objects or look at them while they were uncovered. Anyone who ignored that command would die. Many years before David's journey, Israel carried the ark into a battle against the Philistines. Israel lost the battle, and the Philistines captured it. They took it into their own land and placed it inside the temple of their god, Dagon. The next morning, the Philistines entered the temple and found Dagon's statue lying face down before the ark. They lifted the statue and returned it to its place. But the following morning, Dagon had fallen again. Its head and hands had broken off. Then, sickness and death spread among the Philistines. They moved the ark from one city to another, but trouble followed it. The people became terrified, and their leaders decided to send it back to Israel. The people of Ashdod first sent the ark to Gath, hoping the trouble would stop. But sickness struck Gath as well. Then the ark was sent toward Ekron. When the people of Ekron saw it coming, they cried out because they believed it would bring death into their city. The rulers gathered their priests and asked what they should do. Their answer was to return the ark with an offering and beg Israel's God to remove the judgment. The Philistines placed the ark on a new cart pulled by 2 cows. The animals had never pulled a cart before, and their young calves were kept behind them. Still, the cows walked straight toward Israel, without anyone guiding them. The cart entered a field near the town of Beth Shemesh. The people were gathering wheat when they looked up and saw the ark. They celebrated, broke the cart into pieces, and used its wood for an offering. But some men looked inside the ark, and God struck them down. The frightened people asked who could stand before such a holy God. They sent a message to Kiriath Jearim, and men from that town came for the ark. It was taken to Abinadab's house, and his son Eleazar was chosen to guard it. The ark remained there through years of war and through the rule of King Saul. After David became king, he captured Jerusalem and made it the center of his kingdom. He wanted the ark brought there so the nation could worship God together. David spoke with his commanders and Israel's leaders. He called priests, Levites, and people from across the land. He told them they should bring the ark to Jerusalem if the plan pleased God. Everyone agreed because the idea seemed right. Messages were sent through Israel. Commanders arrived with their men, priests and Levites left their towns, and musicians came carrying their instruments. 30,000 chosen men gathered under David's command before traveling to Kiriath Jearim. But David and the leaders did not ask how God wanted the ark moved. They copied the method once used by the Philistines. They placed it on a new cart and chose Uzzah and Ahio to guide it. The new cart looked clean and respectful. Strong oxen pulled it, and men from Abinadab's house guided it. To everyone watching, the plan appeared safe. But God had provided poles, and the ark was resting on wheels. At first, everything went smoothly. Ahio led the oxen, while Uzzah walked beside the cart. The ground became rough beneath the cart. One of the oxen suddenly stumbled.
Before we continue, these videos takes hours and hours to make. Please like and subscribe, and comment which country you are watching this from.
The cart shook, and the ark began to move. Uzzah reacted immediately. He reached out his hand and took hold of the ark to steady it. His hand touched the holy chest. At once, the anger of God burned against Uzzah because he had touched the ark. He fell beside it and died there before God. The music stopped, the singing ended, and the entire procession stood still. 30,000 men stared at Uzzah's body beside the ark. David became angry because God's judgment had struck Uzzah so suddenly. He named the place Perez Uzzah, which means the outbreak against Uzzah. Then David became afraid of God. The ark had been moving toward his city, but he no longer wanted to bring it any closer. How can the ark of the Lord ever come to me? David asked. The procession did not continue to Jerusalem. David turned aside and took the ark to the nearby house of Obed-Edom the Gittite. It was placed inside his home, and David returned to Jerusalem without it. For 3 months, the ark remained with Obed-Edom. No death struck his family. Instead, God blessed Obed-Edom, his household, and everything he owned. At the end of those 3 months, David was told that God had blessed Obed-Edom because of the ark. The report gave David a reason to prepare another journey. This time, David did not place the ark on a cart. He called the priests Zadok and Abiathar, along with the leaders of the Levite families. He told them to prepare themselves and bring the ark to the place he had made for it in Jerusalem. David also admitted why the first journey had ended in death. It was because you Levites did not bring it up the first time that the Lord our God broke out in anger against us. David said, "We did not ask him how to do it in the proper way." The priests and Levites washed and prepared themselves before approaching the ark. David gathered the main Levite families and gave each person a clear duty. Some men would carry the ark, others would sing, play instruments, or guard the procession. The leaders checked every part of the plan. They chose the men who would stand beneath the poles. They placed trained singers together and arranged the musicians around them. Priests carrying trumpets were placed near the ark, while guards took their positions at the front and back. David prepared a tent for the ark in Jerusalem. He also gathered the people for its arrival. Shenaniah, a leader among the Levites, was placed in charge of the singing because he understood music well. Other Levites carried cymbals, harps, and lyres. Then David traveled to the house of Obed-Edom with Israel's leaders and the prepared Levites. There was no wooden cart waiting outside. The chosen Levites stepped forward. They bent beneath the poles and lifted the ark onto their shoulders, exactly as Moses had commanded. The second procession began. The guards moved into position around the carriers. Singers stood together under Shenaniah's direction, and the musicians raised their instruments. The priests held their trumpets near the ark. David and Israel's leaders took their places. But no celebration began until the Levites had lifted the ark safely. The Levites took one step, then another. The poles remained steady on their shoulders. No one touched the ark, and no one tried to move it in a different way. After the men carrying the ark had taken 6 steps, David stopped the procession. He offered a bull and a fattened calf to God. The Levites then continued toward Jerusalem with the ark raised above them. God helped the men carrying it. 7 bulls and 7 rams were offered, and the musicians began to play. The quiet, careful beginning grew into a great celebration. The carriers moved forward in the same steady order. When the men at the front raised one foot, the others moved with them. The poles stayed straight across their shoulders, and the ark remained above the center of the group. Guards kept the road open, while the singers followed the beat of the instruments. Trumpets sent sharp blasts across the hills. Cymbals crashed above the voices of the crowd, and harps and lyres continued underneath the singing. The people shouted before God while the Levites carried the ark step by step toward Jerusalem. David wore a linen robe and danced before the Lord with all his strength. He jumped and turned in front of the ark, while the people shouted around him. He did not hide behind his soldiers or remain at the back like a distant king. He celebrated at the front of the procession. The priests blew their trumpets. The Levites struck their cymbals and played their harps. Singers lifted their voices as the ark moved closer to Jerusalem. Guards walked beside the carriers, and Israel's leaders followed behind them. The ark remained level above their shoulders, while the whole crowd climbed toward the city. The road climbed higher, and Jerusalem's walls appeared ahead of the procession. The carriers continued without placing the ark down. Priests marched near them, with their trumpets raised, and guards stayed close to every side, while the music followed him toward the gates. More Israelites joined the shouting as the procession approached the city. The singers raised their voices, the musicians played harder, and the carriers kept moving through the center of the celebration. The ark that had stopped beside the threshing floor was now being carried toward Jerusalem, exactly as God had commanded. The sound reached Jerusalem before the procession appeared. People gathered near the walls and filled the streets inside the gates. More voices joined the celebration as David and the ark came into view. David kept dancing at the front. The priests continued blowing their trumpets. The gates of Jerusalem opened. The Levites marched through them, with the ark held high on their shoulders, and David danced before the Lord with all his might.
These videos takes hours and hours to make. Please like and subscribe and comment which country you are watching this from.